Welcome, incredible viewers. Get ready for a story that will shake you to your core and remind you of the immense power of resilience. He abandoned them all, his girlfriend and his 2 little girls, and vanished without a trace. 5 years later, he saw them again, and his world shattered. This isn't just a narrative. It's a profound journey into raw emotion and unexpected connections. If you're looking for a tale that will captivate you from the first word, you've found it. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and comment your thoughts throughout this powerful story. Let's begin. The Price of Silence. A father's unforgivable return. Ethan Vance seemingly had everything a man could desire, or so it appeared to the outside world. At 32, he was the CEO of one of the nation's fastest-growing tech companies, a self-made millionaire. Tall and commanding, with striking blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, he moved through boardrooms and charity galas like an industry prince. He was known for his sharp intellect, feared for his ruthless ambition, and widely admired for his undeniable success. Yet beneath the finely cut suits and the constant glare of flash photography, there was a profound emptiness in his gaze, something even he couldn't quite name. Clara Hayes was unlike anyone Ethan had ever known. A painter from humble beginnings, she held no interest in wealth or power. Her eyes were a deep, expressive brown, full of untold stories, and her long, wavy hair always seemed to be flecked with specks of paint. They met at a small, intimate fundraising event in Crestwood City. He was a reluctant guest, obligated to attend. She was quietly showcasing her artwork in a quiet corner of the grand hall. Their connection was unexpected and electric. Clara didn't care who he was. She spoke to him as if he were simply a man, not a brand, not a figure, not a headline. He found her raw honesty utterly disarming. She, in turn, found his hidden vulnerability beneath his arrogance strangely human. They spent 6 whirlwind months together, the kind of dizzying romance that feels like a dream even as you're living it. They laughed more than he ever thought possible. He would watch her paint in comfortable silence. She would watch him work with quiet fascination. She taught him to slow down, to feel, to be still long enough to simply breathe. He showed her how to dream bigger, how to believe she deserved more. It wasn't perfect. He was cold sometimes, distant without explanation. There were days he would pull away, moments when he would stare blankly into nothingness. But Clara believed in the good she saw in him, and Ethan clung to the light she brought into his life, even if he didn't fully understand it. Then Clara discovered she was pregnant, with twins. She was terrified and euphoric all at once. When she told Ethan, his reaction was like a thunderclap in a clear sky. He looked at her as if she had betrayed him, as if she had shattered something sacred and irreparable. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse or accuse. He simply stood in silence. Completely, terrifyingly silent. Over the next few weeks, he pulled away even further. He missed doctor's appointments. He stopped responding to her messages. When the girls, Olivia and Ruby, were born, he only came to the hospital once. He held them for a brief moment, said they were beautiful, and left without a word of goodbye. When the twins were 4 months old, he vanished completely. One day he was there, distant but present, and the next, he was gone. No calls, no support, no explanation. Clara searched for him. She even went to his company once, only to be turned away at the reception desk like a stranger. A few weeks later, a lawyer contacted her on his behalf with a single message. There will be no further involvement, no more contact. Along with the message came a substantial sum of money, sent as if it could buy her silence, as if it could erase their entire history. Clara never touched the money. She tucked away every photo of him, every memory, and focused solely on surviving. Ethan Vance disappeared from their lives like a ghost, leaving behind 2 small girls who would never know their father, and a woman who had dared to trust a man who proved to be colder than winter itself. If you were Clara, how would you cope with such a profound betrayal and the sudden responsibility of 2 newborns? Share your thoughts on her strength in the comments. Please hit that like button if Clara's resilience inspires you, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage. The first few days after Ethan's disappearance were the hardest of Clara's life. At 26, she found herself alone in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 screaming newborns, no job, no savings, and no family to lean on. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 19, and she had no siblings. The meager support system she did have consisted of fellow struggling artists and a few acquaintances, none of whom could do more than offer sympathy and an occasional babysitting favor. Her world shrank to the cries of 2 tiny girls who needed more than she could possibly give. There were nights she would sit on the bathroom floor, the door closed, a towel wedged under the crack to muffle the sound of her own desperate sobs, desperate not to wake the babies. She was exhausted beyond words, surviving on instant oatmeal and stale coffee, rationing baby formula as if it were gold. Her hands were raw and cracked from constant cleaning. Her back ached from lifting and holding both girls, and her eyes, once full of life and color, were dulled by sleepless nights and silent tears. But no matter how tired she was, how utterly overwhelmed she felt, she never let it show when she was with Olivia and Ruby. When they looked at her with their big blue eyes, she would smile, kiss their foreheads, and whisper promises she wasn't sure she could keep, that they would be all right, that life would get better, that they would never, ever feel wanted. She started working nights as a janitor in an office building downtown. It was the only job she could find that paid slightly above minimum wage and didn't require a college degree or flexible hours, both luxuries she couldn't afford. During the day, she cared for the girls, changed diapers, rocked them to sleep. She fed them with trembling hands when her own stomach roared with hunger. She stole 10-minute naps whenever she could, usually with one baby on her chest and the other curled in the crook of her arm. She didn't so much sleep as shut down, only to wake instantly the second one of them made a sound. She sold most of her possessions, her easel, her canvases, the vintage record player she loved, even the silver bracelet her mother had given her before she died. Each sale felt like giving up a piece of herself, but the money went towards diapers, wipes, powdered formula, and rent. She learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. Sometimes she would go days without eating anything more than toast or canned soup just to ensure the girls had what they needed. Pride no longer had a place in her world. She rarely thought of Ethan in those days, and when she did, it was with a kind of numb disbelief. It was difficult to reconcile the man who had once held her hand and trace the curve of her jawline with the man who had abandoned his own daughters without a backward glance. She repeated to herself over and over that she didn't need him, that the girls didn't either. But there were moments, quiet, lonely moments at 3 a.m, with one baby screaming and the other running a fever, when she wondered how he could live with himself, knowing what he had left behind. In time, she found small pockets of strength. A kind woman at the corner store started saving leftover bread and milk for her. A retired neighbor in her building offered to watch the girls for an hour each afternoon, so Clara could snatch a nap or go for a walk. These gestures became lifelines, small reminders that not all people were cruel or self-serving. Slowly, she began to rebuild herself. She accepted a second job at a coffee shop on weekends, pushing the girls in a double stroller and letting them sleep in the back while she wiped down tables and refilled coffee pots. Her fingers ached from overuse, her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but her spirit, though battered, did not break. What she couldn't give the girls in material comfort, she poured into them in love. She read to them constantly, even when they were too small to understand the words. She sang to them as she folded laundry, made silly faces to make them laugh, and kept a journal where she wrote letters to each of them, chronicling their milestones, their burgeoning personalities, their infectious laughter. In that journal, she allowed herself to dream of a day when they would run through parks without a worry, when she could buy them books and shoes without looking at the price tag, when they would grow up knowing they were cherished and safe. Clara lived each day, minute by minute. There was no long-term plan, no grand vision for the future. Just the next bottle, the next nap, the next work shift. But even in that constant state of survival, she was building something fierce and unbreakable. Love took root deeper than fear. Resilience was born from pain. She was no longer just surviving for herself. She was living for two small girls who had no idea what had been taken from them, but who would one day know what had been built in its place. What specific qualities do you think Clara developed during these challenging years that will be crucial for her future? Share your thoughts below. Don't miss the unexpected turn. Hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories. When Olivia and Ruby turned 3, something in Clara had fundamentally changed. Life was still hard. There were still months when rent came down to the last dollar, nights when the girls coughed in their sleep, and Clara would lie awake with worry building in her chest. But now there was light too. The girls had blossomed into joyous, curious toddlers, with wild blonde curls and impossibly bright blue eyes that drew glances wherever they went. They were inseparable. They spoke in a shared language of giggles and tiny secrets, finishing each other's sentences before they were fully formed. Clara watched them with a constant sense of awe, always with a trace of disbelief that these perfect little people had come from her. Despite everything, despite the weight she carried and the loneliness that still crept in late at night, her daughters were happy, and in their happiness, she found strength. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, Clara took the girls to a local street fair. It had been a last-minute decision, a spontaneous break from her usual routine of work, errands, and quiet nights at home. The streets were bustling with stalls selling handmade goods, food trucks with the scent of funnel cake and roasted corn wafting through the air, and street performers, juggling or painting faces. Clara had managed to buy the girls matching white dresses a few weeks earlier at a second-hand shop, and that morning, she had carefully washed and ironed them. She didn't know why she did it. Maybe it was just a small act of hope, a quiet declaration that her daughters deserved beauty too. As the girls twirled in circles to the beat of a street violinist, a local photographer who had been covering the event noticed them. He was drawn by their energy, the way they moved in perfect synchronicity, without any choreography, their golden hair catching the sunlight as they spun. Without interrupting them, he snapped a photo. It was just a moment, two sisters laughing amidst a crowded street, oblivious to the camera or the world watching them. He uploaded it to his photography blog that night, titling it, Joy. What he didn't expect was for the photo to go viral in a matter of hours. People responded with overwhelming emotion, flooding the comments with words like magical, pure, and hopeful. The photo was shared across social media, picked up by community pages, and eventually featured by a popular online magazine that focused on human interest stories. Clara only found out when her friend from the coffee shop called her frantically, exclaiming, "I swear I just saw your daughters on the internet homepage." At first, Clara panicked. She wasn't used to being seen, not after so many years of trying to remain invisible. But when she saw the image, their tiny hands intertwined, their faces lit with innocent joy, she cried. Not out of fear, but from something else, something that had been dormant for a very long time. Pride. A few days later, she was contacted by a children's modeling agency in the city. The representative had seen the photo and wanted to meet with Clara and the girls. At first, Clara hesitated. It sounded too good to be true, and she had learned the hard way not to trust promises wrapped in glitter. But the agency was legitimate, professional, and kind. They offered her full control, no pressure, and the opportunity to earn real money. Money that could change everything. The girl's first job was a simple advertisement for a clothing brand specializing in sibling sets. The photo shoot took place in a sunlit studio filled with plush toys and colorful props. Clara stayed by their side the entire time, never letting them out of her sight. To her surprise, Olivia and Ruby took to the camera naturally, laughing and playing without fear, reacting to the photographer as if the whole thing were just a fun game. The brand loved them. Other offers followed. It wasn't long before Clara was able to quit her cleaning job and cut down her hours at the coffee shop. For the first time, they had breathing room, enough to pay rent in advance, to buy fresh fruit without calculating the cost per ounce, to replace the girls' worn-out shoes with new ones that actually fit. She still lived cautiously. Every time she deposited a check, she did so with the nagging awareness that it could all vanish as suddenly as it had arrived. But she also started allowing herself small luxuries. She bought new art supplies and began painting again during the girls' naps. At first, her hands were stiff, her strokes hesitant, as if she had forgotten the language of color. But then muscle memory returned, and with it, a flood of emotions she had long suppressed. Her first new painting was of the girls at the street fair, recreated from memory. She titled it, "Still Twirling." Clara also started keeping a portfolio again. Nothing public, just a folder on her desk, with scanned images of her work. It felt as if she was planting seeds she wasn't sure would ever bloom. But the act alone made her feel alive. When the girls asked her for stories, she began inventing picture books on the spot, narrating tales of brave princesses who didn't need rescuing, of twin sisters who crossed enchanted forests and tamed dragons with kindness. Sometimes she would sketch the characters afterward, tucking the drawings into the back of her journal. Life wasn't easy. By no means. There were still bad days, tantrums, fevers, bills she forgot. Moments of doubt so strong they resonated. But now there was something more too. Possibility. A future she could imagine without panic. She no longer walked with her head down. She no longer avoided mirrors or strangers' faces. Something had changed. She hadn't just survived. She had begun to build. And it all began with a single photograph, a moment of unfiltered joy that the world witnessed. How do you think Clara's newfound success and confidence will impact her future interactions with Ethan? Should they ever meet again? Share your predictions. Don't miss the shocking reunion. Like this video and subscribe to our channel now for more. Ethan Vance hadn't thought of Clara or the twins in years. Not really. On the rare occasions their names flickered through his mind, it was more like a dull echo than a memory, as if it had happened to someone else in another life. He had buried that chapter so deeply, it might as well have never existed. In his world, there was no room for hesitation, no time to revisit the past. Business had consumed everything. His company had doubled in value since the year he walked away. And now he spent his days flying between cities, closing deals, shaking hands with billionaires, and standing under lights that never quite warmed him. Every aspect of his life was calculated, curated, and efficient. The people closest to him were assistants and publicists. The closest thing he had to family was his chauffeur. One Thursday evening, at a high-profile charity gala in Midtown, his carefully constructed distance shattered. The event was an art exhibition supporting children's literacy, something his public relations team had urged him to attend for image's sake. He arrived late, dressed in his usual immaculate black suit, prepared to make an appearance and leave without lingering. The gallery space was stark white and minimalist, dotted with vibrant children's illustrations, many of them playful and colorful. He moved through the crowd with practiced indifference until he stopped in front of a particular painting that made him choke. It was a watercolor, soft and dreamlike, depicting two small girls holding hands on a sunny street, laughing under strings of carnival lights. Their dresses were white. Their golden hair fell in soft curls. Their eyes, bright, clear, unmistakable, were blue. The painting wasn't signed, but the small plaque beneath it read Olivia and Ruby by C. Hayes. He stared at the names. The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath his feet. He tried to walk away, but he couldn't. He stood there too long. People passed by, oblivious that the man of perfect posture had turned to stone. 1,000 thoughts surged through him, but none could take form. He found himself scanning the crowd, scrutinizing every woman's face, hoping not to find her, and terrified that he might. He hadn't uttered her name aloud in 5 years. Seeing it in initials was enough for something buried deep in his chest to break open. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse with the lights off, watching the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows, trying to control the frantic pounding in his chest. He took out his phone and typed Olivia and Ruby into the search bar, not knowing what he expected to find. In seconds, the photo appeared, the one from the street fair. It had circulated for months, but he had never seen it. There they were again, laughing, twirling, alive in a way that felt like a lightning strike in a photograph. He clicked on the article and scanned it quickly. His fingers tightened as he reached the line. Their mother, Clara Hayes, attributes her daughter's joy to having helped her survive unimaginable hardship. There was no mention of him, no hint he had ever existed. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole, and the world had simply moved on. He spent the next few hours clicking every link he could find, reading interviews, watching clips, tracing a life that had unfolded completely without him. The girls had appeared in a handful of advertising campaigns, always together, always smiling. Clara had quietly started selling paintings again. Children's illustrations, small commissions, nothing ostentatious, but enough to be noticed in local art circles. She looked different in the photos, older, stronger, her features softer, yet her posture firmer. There was a stability in her face, a calm he didn't remember. And yet, he could still see the Clara he had known in the way she held her daughter's hands, in the inclination of her head when she smiled at them. Guilt hit him like a punch to the chest, sudden and merciless. He had told himself for years that leaving had been the right thing to do, that he wasn't cut out to be a father, that Clara and the girls would be better off without him, that disappearing was a kind of mercy. But the justifications crumbled in the stillness of that night, drowned out by the undeniable reality of what he had lost. He had missed first steps, first words, birthdays, nights of fever and comfort, laughter that could have been his. He had left behind not a broken version of himself, but two living, breathing children who didn't even know his name. The next morning, he canceled all his meetings and made a call to a private investigator. It didn't take long. Within 24 hours, he had her address. It was a small apartment on the edge of Riverside Heights, modest but clean, with window boxes on the sills and chalk drawings on the sidewalk outside. He drove there himself, sitting in the back of a black car, staring at the building as if it were the edge of a cliff. The driver asked if he wanted to get out. Ethan didn't respond. He watched, frozen, as a door opened and two little girls ran down the steps. They were laughing, tugging at each other towards the street. Behind them, Clara followed, calling to them softly, holding a grocery bag in one hand and tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear with the other. Time stopped. He hadn't imagined it. They were real. The girls were real. Clara was real. And he was the ghost. He watched them disappear around the corner. He didn't get out. He didn't speak. He simply sat there, utterly undone, his chest heavy with a realization he couldn't escape. They had built a world without him, and it was beautiful. And yet, even from a distance, he felt the overwhelming, painful pull of that world. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Vance didn't know what to do next. Imagine you are Clara. What emotions would you feel seeing Ethan after all these years, especially now that you've built a life without him? How would you react? Share your thoughts below. Don't miss the raw, emotional confrontation. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more intense stories. Ethan returned to that Riverside Heights street 3 times before he found the courage to step out of the car. Each time, he sat in the back seat, watching the front door of Clara's apartment from behind tinted windows, his heart pounding in his chest like a hammer hitting steel. He told himself he was just gathering information, just observing, just waiting for the right moment. But the truth was simpler and far more humiliating. He was scared. He was a man who had stood in boardrooms before the most powerful people in the world. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without blinking. He had silenced entire rooms with a single glance. And yet, he couldn't face the woman he had abandoned and the daughters he had never held beyond their first few days of life. It wasn't the fear of confrontation that stopped him. It was shame. On the 4th day, shortly after noon, he stepped out of the car. He wore a wool coat over a dark suit, his usual uniform, though now it felt like armor. In one hand, he carried a small paper bag with 2 identical plush teddy bears he had chosen after pacing a toy store for an hour. In the other, a sealed envelope containing a letter he had rewritten at least 20 times. The words still didn't feel right. There was no way to say what he needed to say, not without sounding inadequate. But he carried it anyway. The sidewalk was silent. A few fallen leaves scraped the pavement in the wind. His polished shoes echoed against the concrete as he walked towards the door, each step heavier than the last. He stopped at the top of the steps, staring at the brass numbers on the door, forcing himself to knock. His hand floated in the air. Then it dropped. He couldn't do it. Not like this. He turned, ready to leave again. When the door opened behind him, Ruby was the first to appear. She was smaller than he expected. She wore a pink sweatshirt with cartoon cats on the front and held a small juice box. She looked at him with wide, blue eyes that were exactly like his own. There was no recognition on her face, only the cautious curiosity of a child meeting a stranger. A moment later, Olivia emerged behind her, chattering excitedly about something, followed by Clara, who froze mid-sentence when she saw him. For a long, suffocating second, no one moved. Clara stared at him, her arms instinctively extending towards the girls, her body moving in front of them with a quiet, protective strength. She didn't utter his name. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Ethan's throat closed. The bag in his hand suddenly felt ridiculous. He took a step forward and offered the envelope, his voice dry and unsteady. "I'm sorry to come like this. I didn't know any other way." Clara's expression didn't change. She looked at the envelope, then back at him. Her eyes weren't angry, nor were they soft. They were hard in a way that came from years of silence, of enduring without closure. She took the letter with the tips of her fingers, as if it might burn. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice quiet and level. Ethan swallowed. "I don't know," he said with raw honesty. "To see them, to see you, to apologize, even though it's nowhere near enough." Hearing his voice, the girls looked at him again. Olivia tilted her head. "Mommy, who is he?" Clara didn't answer immediately. Her jaw tightened. She turned to the girls and knelt beside them. "He's someone we used to know. Someone who made a mistake." Ruby looked at him again, her tiny forehead furrowed. "Is he sad?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, very sad." Something in Ethan broke. He knelt down, not daring to move closer. His voice cracked when he spoke again. "I've missed so much. I don't deserve anything from you, but I needed to see that you were all right." Clara stood, keeping the girls close. "We are," she said quietly. "We've been all right for a long time." He nodded slowly, a tense, barely visible movement, his chest heavy with regret. "I can go. I didn't mean to cause trouble. For the first time." Clara truly looked at him then. She looked past the expensive coat and designer shoes, past the perfectly styled hair and the polished exterior. She saw what she had once seen before anyone else. She saw the trembling edges of a man falling apart. "No," she said, surprising herself. "You're not leaving again. Not this time." He looked at her, startled. "You want to see them?" she said, her voice low. "You want to be something in their lives? Then show up. Prove it. Earn it. Because they don't know who you are, and I'm not going to let you hurt them again." He nodded, his eyes bright with tears. "I'll do whatever it takes." "I'm not promising you a place," she said, taking a step back. "You're not their father just because you share their blood. You have to become one." "I know," he whispered. Clara looked at the teddy bears in his hand, then at the girls. "You can leave them on the porch." Ethan carefully placed the bag beside the steps. Then he turned and walked back towards the car, not knowing if he would ever be allowed into that world again, but knowing he would return. Not as a CEO, not as the man he had been, but as someone willing to do the work, no matter how long it took. And as he got into the car, wiping away a tear that had escaped without permission, he realized that for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost. He felt human. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was a beginning. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of this new beginning for both Ethan and Clara? Share your insights in the comments. Don't miss a moment of this incredible journey. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates. The following weeks were anything but simple. Clara did not invite Ethan back into their lives. She didn't forgive him overnight, nor did she grant him access to the girls simply because he had shown up with a remorseful expression and a letter filled with apologies. Her trust was not something he could win back with one visit or one gift. It had been shattered 5 years ago, and she had spent every day since learning to live without expecting anyone to pick up the pieces. What Ethan had done, walking away when his daughters were only 4 months old, was not a mistake that could be easily overlooked. It had been abandonment in its fullest form, and although her wounds had scarred over, the pain still lived just beneath the surface. What changed, however, was that Clara now also saw the pain in him, not as a justification, not as a redemption, but as a door. He showed up again 2 days later, this time without flowers, without letters, without gifts. Just himself. He stood on the same step, waiting patiently, and when Clara opened the door, he simply asked, "Can I talk to someone? A good?" She was stunned by the sincerity of his tone. At first, she didn't respond, but something in her finally allowed her to nod, just once, before closing the door. That was how it began. Clara filed for full legal custody shortly after. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. She wasn't sure if Ethan would keep coming, and she wasn't going to risk her daughter's security with someone who had already shown how easily he could disappear. He didn't object. In fact, he offered to pay all legal fees. He signed every document, admitted every failure, and when the court date arrived, he sat in silence, listening as Clara's lawyer laid out the story of abandonment in painstaking detail. His own lawyer had advised him to contest, or at least negotiate partial visitation. But Ethan refused. "She's right," he said in a statement to the judge. "She's done everything. I wasn't there. I have no right to demand." The media, of course, caught wind of the story. A high-profile millionaire CEO sued for child support by a single mother with 2 photogenic daughters was a narrative too tempting to ignore. The headlines were brutal. Tech mogul's secret family. Millionaire dad abandoned twins. Mom raised daughters alone. Now he wants back in. Reporters stalked Clara's building. Cameras waited outside her work. Strangers online criticized her parenting. They speculated about her motives. They called her both a saint and a gold digger. Through it all, Clara remained silent. She issued no statements. She refused all interviews. Her priority was to protect Olivia and Ruby, to shield them from a world that had no right to their story. Ethan, to his credit, never spoke to the press either. His public relations team begged him to issue a carefully worded apology, to spin the story to be palatable and forgivable. He fired them. Then he took the money he would have spent on damage control and discreetly, without announcement, donated it to a non-profit organization that provided support for single mothers and children in foster care. He also started attending therapy 3 times a week with a specialist in parental trauma and family reintegration. He didn't tell Clara this. He wasn't trying to score points. He was trying to become someone his daughters wouldn't be ashamed to know. Slowly and cautiously, Clara allowed a sliver of contact. It began with supervised meetings at a neutral facility. The girls were told Ethan was a friend, someone who cared about them. They were curious, open-hearted, without the weight of history to cloud their vision. At first, Ethan sat rigidly on the edge of the playroom rug, overwhelmed by the smallness of their voices and the immensity of his own guilt. But children are strange, generous creatures, and they accepted him with surprising ease, asking him to help build block towers, to play memory card games, and to read them books with funny voices. He followed their lead, never pushing, never correcting, never referring to himself as their father. He was simply Alex, the man with tired eyes and a careful smile. Clara watched it all. She was never more than a room away, and though her heart remained guarded, she couldn't deny what she saw. Ethan was trying, not ostentatiously, not for attention, but with a quiet desperation that suggested he was terrified of being given this chance and screwing it up. He asked questions. He listened. He never tried to rewrite the past or diminish the pain. And when the girls began to refer to him as our Alex, it was Clara who felt her chest tighten with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. A reluctant hope. There were setbacks, of course. Moments when the girls would ask why he hadn't been there when they were babies, and Ethan's voice would falter, trying to explain. Moments when Clara almost told him to leave again, when the weight of old wounds threatened to drag her under. But he kept coming back, not with promises, not with apologies, but with presence. He showed up. Rain or shine, or tired or overwhelmed, he never missed a session. He never asked for more than what was given. In court, he was officially granted limited visitation, conditioned on continued therapy and supervised engagement. He accepted it all, with the quiet dignity of a man who had lost something precious and was learning to earn it back piece by piece. The judge noted, for the record, the extraordinary growth and responsibility Ethan had demonstrated, a rare sight. He said, in cases like these, for the first time in 5 years, there was no longer silence between them. There was pain, yes, and distance, and many things left unsaid. But there was also conversation. And in that fragile, unfinished space, something began to take root. Not forgiveness yet. Not trust yet. But the beginning of something that could one day become both. How do you think consistent effort and presence, rather than grand gestures, ultimately impact the process of rebuilding trust and relationships? Share your thoughts below. Don't miss the heartwarming climax of this unforgettable story. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. You are now. 2 years passed. They didn't fly by, and they didn't heal everything. But they passed in their own slow, honest way, day by day, season by season. Ethan showed up for every visit, every birthday, every school recital, and every scraped knee he was allowed to be present for. He sat in uncomfortable parent-teacher conferences, beside Clara, in small plastic chairs, always careful not to overstep, always grateful to be there. He never tried to force affection. He never expected the girls to call him Dad. He was just Alex, the man who made them laugh with bad jokes, and always remembered their favorite colors, who took them to the bookstore every other Saturday, and let them each choose a book without looking at the price. His love wasn't shown in grand gestures, but in consistency. He slowly, quietly, became a fixture in their world. Not the center, but a strong, constant part of it. Clara remained cautious, though no longer cold. She was a mother first and always. Her trust had been earned gradually, like sand filling a jar grain by grain. What surprised her most wasn't how much Ethan had changed, but how little fear he had of letting her see the effort behind the change. He didn't act like a man who had it all figured out. He admitted when he felt insecure, he asked for her opinion. He apologized, not just for the past, but for small things in the present, the little stumbles most people ignored. He had become a man who took responsibility, even when he could have made excuses. And that, more than anything else, made her start to believe in him again. By now, the girls were 7 years old. They had grown, their baby features giving way to the first glimpses of the young women they would one day become. They still wore matching outfits sometimes, not because Clara dressed them that way, but because they insisted on it. They loved storybooks and science kits, played soccer in the park, and had an alarming number of opinions on everything from breakfast cereal to politics. And at some point, they had started calling him our Alex, less, and Daddy more. Not every time, not consistently, but enough that it would catch in his throat when it happened. Clara wasn't rushing to define what they were now. She didn't need a label for it. Their lives had grown into something real, something rooted in mutual effort. They didn't live together. Clara had established that boundary early on, but Ethan had moved into a neighborhood only 20 minutes away. He found a modest townhouse with a small garden and invited the girls to plant flowers there on weekends. They chose daisies and sunflowers and called it the Happy Corner. He never tried to make parenting decisions, but he started asking to be included in things like school registration forms and doctor's visits. And after a while, Clara started saying yes. Then came the day that would change everything again, but in a way no one expected. A national talk show, known for honoring everyday heroes and surprise reunions, contacted Clara's email after discovering her artwork and the viral photo of the twins from years earlier. At first, she refused. She had no interest in turning her story into a spectacle. But after several conversations, she realized the show's purpose wasn't fame. It was recognition, and more importantly, a platform. They wanted to highlight the resilience of single mothers, the beauty of a family built through struggle, and the quiet strength of people who survive what seems impossible. Clara agreed with one condition. The focus would be on the girls and the art, not on the pain. Ethan was also invited, at the producer's suggestion, but it was Clara who decided to let him come. She told him with a note, simple and short. "They want you there. I do too." The studio was large and brightly lit, filled with cameras and a live audience, but the host's warmth made it feel more like a living room than a stage. Clara and the girls sat down first. The host guided them through questions about art, about growing up together, about laughter and healing. There were smiles, some tears, and even some chuckles from the crowd when Ruby declared that her mommy was better than superheroes because she doesn't even need a cape to save the day. Then the host gestured towards the side stage and introduced the next guest. Ethan walked out to soft applause. The girls ran to hug him, completely oblivious to the cameras, and the host gently asked him to share his part of the story. He didn't sugarcoat it. He said he had failed. He said he had walked away from something precious because he was scared and broken. He admitted he didn't deserve a second chance, but that Clara had given him the opportunity to become the kind of man he should have been all along, and that the girls, through their love and openness, had taught him how to be a father. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when he turned to Clara. He reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded a small piece of paper. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a proposal in the traditional sense. It was a promise, handwritten and imperfect. He read aloud, "You gave them life. You gave me a soul. You taught me what love looks like when it's hard, and what grace means when it's undeserved. I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking for the chance to keep showing up, for them and for you." The crowd held its breath. Clara said nothing at first. She stared at him for a long moment, the memory of all they had been and all they had survived flickering across her face. Then she reached out her hand, not with a dramatic gesture, not with tears, but with a quiet, knowing look. A signal. Yes, perhaps not forever yet, but yes to the present, yes to healing, yes to moving forward. The audience rose to its feet. The host stepped back. The cameras faded, and for a moment, the world outside the studio disappeared, leaving only the four of them. Two children who had never stopped believing in magic, a mother who had become a fortress, and a man who was learning to be a home. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, a real beginning. What do you think is the most impactful aspect of Ethan's public confession and Clara's quiet acceptance? Share your thoughts below. 6 months later, the rhythm of their lives had shifted. Not drastically, not like a sudden plot twist in a novel, but slowly, naturally, like tides pulling at the shore, inch by inch. Clara and Ethan didn't move in together, nor did they rush into a new label. There were no grand declarations or signed contracts, but there was presence. There was shared time, equal effort, and decisions made together without fear or resentment. The lines that had once been drawn with iron had softened into something more fluid. Ethan now picked the girls up from school on Wednesdays. He stayed for dinner on Fridays, and often spent Sunday mornings with them at the farmer's market, letting Ruby convince him to buy jam. He didn't need, and Olivia challenged him to races between produce stalls. It became a pattern, a partnership not forged by obligation, but by hard-won trust. Clara still fiercely guarded her independence. After all those years surviving alone, of proving she could carry the world on her shoulders, she didn't hand over her life like a gift to be unwrapped. But she no longer carried the burden alone. She let Ethan carry pieces of it. Not just the parenting parts, but also the quiet things, the school forms, the forgotten laundry, the mornings when she was too tired to cook. And slowly, her defenses stopped feeling like armor and started feeling like boundaries that could bend without breaking. Ethan had changed in ways few people ever manage. He still ran his company, still wore expensive suits, held meetings with investors and developers, but there was something unshakably different about him. He no longer operated from a place of detachment. He spoke less like a man in control and more like a man who paid attention. He had become a listener. He had learned to say, "I don't know," and "You were right," and "I'm sorry," not out of weakness, but out of a profound respect for the life he had once walked away from and was now honored to be allowed back into. The man who had once vanished without a word now stayed, when it was inconvenient, when it was painful, when it required patience and humility. And the girls noticed. Children are always watching, even when they don't understand. Olivia began drawing her family with 4 figures instead of 3. Ruby started calling him Daddy in casual conversation, without asking permission, without making a ceremony of it, simply reclaiming the word as if it had always belonged to him. Clara continued painting. Her work had gained quiet recognition after the talk show aired. Small galleries contacted her. Some publishers inquired if she would consider illustrating children's books. She accepted one, a gentle story about twin sisters who chase stars and build homes of light. And for the first time in years, she felt she was standing not just as a mother, but as an artist, as a woman with something of her own again. Her world was no longer defined by survival, but by creation. The girls watched her paint at the kitchen table, sometimes adding scribbles in the corners, asking questions about the characters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was profoundly alive. The apartment, once cramped and weary, now felt like a place where things grew. One afternoon, just before the school year ended, the 4 of them went to the park where the original street fair had been held years before. The girls ran ahead, chasing each other, giggling in their matching dresses, still radiating that same joy that had once stopped time in a single photograph. Clara and Ethan sat on a bench under a tree, watching them, not speaking for a while. There was no need. They were surrounded by the sounds of children's laughter, the rustling of leaves, and the familiar rhythm of shared silence. Finally, Ethan turned to her and said, "I used to think love had to be earned with perfection. But you taught me it's earned with consistency, with showing up even when you're scared." Clara looked at him, not with the intense ferocity of old anger, but with the quiet strength of someone who has overcome her own anguish. "Perfection was never what I wanted," she said. "Just truth. Just someone who stays when it's hard." And he had stayed, not because he wanted to rewrite the past, but because he was ready to live the future. Honest, messy, and together. That night, as the girls fell asleep curled up next to Clara on the sofa, a soft rain tapped against the windows. Ethan was in the kitchen washing dishes, humming a tune he didn't even realize he knew. He didn't need a ceremony, or a title, or applause. He had a home now, not a place, but a sense of belonging, a chance to keep showing up. And in the quiet, unassuming way that mattered most, he had finally become the man they deserved. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. This story isn't about redemption through romance or neat resolutions. It's about the slow, often painful work of taking responsibility for the harm we caused and the rare courage it takes to forgive without forgetting. Ethan's transformation isn't heroic. It's human. He doesn't earn a fairy tale ending because he returns. He earns it because he chooses over and over again to stay when it's uncomfortable, humiliating, and difficult. And Clara's strength lies not just in her survival, but in her refusal to let bitterness define her. She protects, she builds, and finally, she allows light back in. Not because she needs to be saved, but because she recognizes when someone finally learns to love the right way. The true beauty of this ending is that it doesn't promise perfection. It promises effort. And sometimes, that's the most honest and powerful kind of love there is. What part of Ethan and Clara's journey resonated with you the most, and why? Share your insights in the comments below. Stop. If you believe that the truth, especially in the hands of courageous children, can dismantle a powerful empire built on lies, then hit the subscribe button and like this video right now. Comment below with the city you're listening from and prepare to be amazed. The Quintuple Revolution, Truth versus the Crown Empire. Imagine being erased from history, not just from a man's life, but from his memory itself. Octavia Ramirez, a beautiful, struggling single mother, was abandoned and left pregnant by the man who vowed to love her. That man was Alexander Alex Sterling, an heir to the formidable Sterling Global Holdings, an empire of power, fame, and unimaginable wealth. Alex had it all, but he forgot the only thing that truly mattered. He had 5 small hearts waiting for him, 5 children he didn't know existed, 5 perfect mirrors of his own face. When the truth resurfaces, not through a lawyer's brief, but through the brilliant, determined hands of the children themselves, it ignites a battle against a corporate dynasty fueled by manipulated memories, silent blackmail, a kidnapping attempt, and a stunning revelation that will forever change the future of one of America's most powerful families. This is the story of how 5 little voices dared to challenge a lie a decade in the making. The small, chipped bathroom mirror didn't lie. Octavia Tavi Rocha ran trembling fingers across her forehead, pushing back a lock of brown hair that insisted on falling into her eyes. The home pregnancy test, with its 2 unmistakable pink lines, seemed to mock her from the rim of the cracked porcelain sink. "Oh Lord," she whispered, her legs suddenly weak. She sank onto the toilet lid, breathing deeply to fight the nausea that washed over her. This was supposed to be a moment of joy. She and Alex had talked about children, about the future they would build together. Just 2 weeks ago, he had knelt before her in her tiny, rented apartment in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, with a simple yet elegant ring, promising he would finally introduce her to his family, promising he would stand up to the Sterling Empire for her. Now, Alex Sterling had been missing for 5 days. Phone off, apartment empty, messages unanswered. As if the earth had swallowed him whole. Tavi's family home in the heart of the Bronx had never felt as suffocating as it did that night. Sitting at the kitchen table, she revealed her pregnancy and Alex's disappearance to her parents. "I told you! I told you!" Don Miguel's voice boomed through the kitchen, his construction worker hands slamming the table. "These rich folks are no good. 3 years hiding you like you were an embarrassment, and you still believed his marriage promise." "Miguel, calm down," interceded Doña Sofia, Tavi's mother, placing a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "The girl is hurting enough." "Hurting is an understatement. Now she's raising a child alone. Do you know what happens to a decent girl when she has a child without a father? She becomes the neighborhood joke." "I'm going to find him," Tavi declared, wiping away a stubborn tear. "Something is wrong. Alex wouldn't do this to me." "Daughter, wake up. The boy didn't even introduce you to his family in 3 years. He was playing you." The argument continued late into the night. The next morning, determined to find answers, Tavi took the subway to Midtown. The Sterling Global Holdings skyscraper was an imposing tower of mirrored glass that reflected the gray New York sky. In the luxurious lobby, the receptionist scrutinized her, noting the simple cotton dress and worn shoes. "May I help you?" she asked with cold courtesy. "I need to speak with Alexander Sterling. It's urgent." The receptionist raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Mr. Sterling is unavailable. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" Tavi took a deep breath. "I'm his fiancée. I need to find him urgently." The ensuing silence was sharp. The receptionist looked at her as if she had said something absurd, then smiled condescendingly. "Ma'am, Mr. Sterling has been engaged to Miss Victoria Vance, the banking heiress, for 3 months now. Their engagement party made the cover of every society magazine." The words hit Tavi like a punch to the stomach. "That's impossible! He proposed to me 2 weeks ago!" "I'm sorry, but I must ask you to leave before I have to call security," Tavi insisted, her voice rising, drawing the attention of passing executives. That was when a man in an impeccable suit and receding gray hair approached. "Is there a problem here?" The deep, authoritative voice made the receptionist immediately straighten up. "Dr. Allister, this young lady claims to be your son's fiancée." The cold, gray-blue eyes of the Sterling family patriarch studied Tavi with calculated indifference. She immediately recognized those eyes. They were Alex's. "My son has been in London for a month, preparing to take over our European office after his marriage," he stated without emotion. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but I suggest you end this farce before I take legal action." "It's not a farce. I have all the texts, the photos." Tavi frantically searched for her cell phone. "We've been together for 3 years. He has a crescent-shaped birthmark on his right shoulder. He's allergic to peanuts and terrified of heights. How would I know those things?" A shadow of something indefinable crossed the man's face. "Security," he called softly. "Escort this young lady out, and ensure she doesn't bother us again." Tears blurred her vision as she was escorted out of the building. On the sidewalk of the busy avenue, Tavi felt the world spin. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from her father. "Don't come home until you resolve this embarrassment. I don't want lying daughters under my roof." The days that followed turned into a nightmare. Unable to return home and with few resources, Tavi slept in shelters, then on park benches, struggling to survive while her body housed a life, or lives, as she would discover 2 months later, when an ultrasound revealed not 1, but 5 small heartbeats. It was on a bench in Central Park, almost passing out from hunger, that Mrs. Elena found her, a kindly, dark-haired woman in her 60s, wearing a colorful shawl and a determined expression. "Child, you look terrible," she said, offering a bottle of water. "How long since you've eaten properly?" Tavi could barely speak. The weeks on the streets had drained her strength. Mrs. Elena asked no more questions. She simply helped her up and took her to the St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church in Harlem, where she volunteered as a caretaker. "I can't pay you back," Tavi murmured when the woman offered her a small room in the back of the church. "The Lord has already paid for us all," Mrs. Elena simply replied. "Now eat and rest. We'll talk tomorrow." It was under the roof of that small church that Tavi finally found some peace. With the support of Mrs. Elena and the local community, she got a part-time job cleaning. The nights, however, were filled with silent tears and unanswered questions. How could Alex do this to her? Why did he lie for so long? What had truly happened? The multiple pregnancy was extremely difficult. In the 6th month, Tavi had to quit her job, confined to almost total bed rest. When doctors at the city clinic suggested fetal reduction to increase the survival chances of the other babies, she vehemently refused. "They will all be born," she declared with a determination that surprised even herself. "And they will live." The story of the young woman pregnant with quintuplets, living in the back of the church, spread throughout the neighborhood. Soon, small donations began to arrive. Baby clothes, diapers, a used chest of drawers. Mrs. Elena organized a charity bazaar that raised enough money to buy 5 simple cribs. When she completed her 8th month, Tavi woke up in the middle of the night with sharp pains. Mrs. Elena rushed her to Harlem Hospital. The next 48 hours were a blur of running doctors, beeping monitors, and the constant fear of losing the babies. When she finally opened her eyes after the emergency C-section, the world looked different. 5 tiny, premature but fierce beings had been taken to the NICU. 2 needed respiratory support in the first hours. "They are warriors, just like their mother," the nurse said when Tavi finally got to see them 3 days later. 3 boys and 2 girls, all beautiful. Tavi looked at those tiny faces, each a perfect blend of her and Alex. All 5 had the same fair skin, and it was clear they would have their father's light hair. Even so small, the aristocratic features of the Sterling lineage were visible. "Ethan Michael," she murmured, gently touching the first baby. "Gabriel Henry," she continued to the second. "Lucas Raphael, Theodore Emmanuel." And finally, the girl who was born last, the smallest of all, but with a surprising vigor in her lungs when she cried. "Aurora Elena." "Beautiful names," commented Mrs. Elena, watching the scene with tear-filled eyes. "They're going to be a handful, aren't they?" Tavi smiled, feeling something beyond pain for the first time in months. "Yes, but they are my family now." The first years were a constant test of resilience. Tavi rarely slept more than 3 hours a night. Between feedings, diaper changes, and night crying, she used any free moment to knit, a skill learned from her mother that now became her main source of income. Mrs. Elena helped during the day, while Tavi cleaned houses in the area. When the quintuplets turned 2, Tavi finally managed to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment in the outskirts of the Bronx. The walls were peeling, the ceiling leaked, but it was theirs, a place to raise her children with dignity. As they grew, the personality differences between the 5 siblings sharpened. Ethan, the quietest, observed everything with his father's same penetrating eyes. Gabriel was restless, always questioning, exploring every corner of the house. Lucas was a chatterbox from an early age, charming neighbors with his fluent speech. Theodore surprised everyone with his ease of learning. At 3, he already knew the full alphabet. Aurora, however, was special. The youngest of the 5 had a fierce determination that sometimes even frightened Tavi. When contradicted, her blue eyes grew stormy like the sky before a major tempest. "That girl is going places," Mrs. Elena would comment, watching the little one methodically arrange her dolls by size. "She has fire in her gaze." Despite all the financial difficulties, Tavi never allowed her children to lack love or education. In the hours between cleaning and knitting, she taught them basic math, reading, and even English, using free videos on the internet. Instead of expensive toys, she created educational games with recycled materials. "Why doesn't our daddy ever visit us?" Aurora asked one night when they were 5. The children shared a single room with 3 cramped bunk beds. Tavi froze in the middle of the bedtime story. She had prepared a softened version of the truth for when this moment came. "Your father, he lives very far away. He doesn't know where we are. Can we look for him? Suggested Theodore, ever the practical one. One day, Tavi replied vaguely. Now it's time to sleep. But the questions didn't cease as the years passed. As the quintuplets grew and entered school, the differences between them and the other children became more evident. Their refined features, above-average intelligence, and the polite demeanor Tavi insisted on cultivating made them stand out in the peripheral school environment. They look nothing like you, one of the teachers once commented during a parent meeting. The father must be very handsome. Tavi just smiled politely, swallowing the pain that never completely left her. In recent years, she had tried a few times to find Alex, discovering through online news that he had, in fact, married Victoria Vance, the heiress of a traditional banking family. The latest information indicated they were living in London, where he was managing the European subsidiary of the family businesses. Meanwhile, Tavi reinvented herself. Cleaning jobs gave way to a small catering business, delivering quick meals to local offices. Late into the night, she studied online, determined to get a college degree. The small house was gradually improved, a bathroom renovated here, a fresh coat of paint there, second-hand furniture lovingly restored. When the quintuplets turned 7, an incident changed the course of their lives. During a computer class at the public school, a news report about the most promising young executives in the U.S. appeared on the screen Theodore was using. The face of Alexander Sterling, smiling and confident, was there, alongside the news of his return to New York to assume the presidency of the family businesses. "Mom, look who looks like Theo when he grows up," Lucas exclaimed when they returned home, showing the image he had printed at school. Tavi felt the blood freeze in her veins. The resemblance was undeniable. Theodore was practically a miniature version of Alex, with the same penetrating eyes and determined chin. "Who is he, Mom?" Aurora asked, studying Tavi's reaction with her discerning eyes. "No one important," Tavi replied, putting the paper away. But it was too late. Aurora had seen the name in the report, and her sharp mind would soon connect the dots. That night, after the children were asleep, Tavi cried silently in the kitchen. Alex was back in New York. After 8 years, he would again be breathing the same air as her, walking the same streets. The pain she thought was dormant returned with full force. She didn't know it, but in the next room, Aurora wasn't sleeping. Sitting up in bed with an improvised flashlight made from a water bottle, the girl was searching on the old donation cell phone. Alexander Sterling Executive. The information she found left her stunned but determined. The matter seemed closed, but 3 weeks later, Aurora approached her mother while Tavi was preparing Sunday lunch, the only day she didn't work. "Mom, is this man our father?" she asked directly, showing a photo of Alex on her phone. "The boys and I did some research. He has the same last name you sometimes say in your sleep. And we look a lot like him." Tavi dropped the spoon she was holding, the shock evident on her face. All 5 were there, in the small kitchen, looking at her expectantly. "Sit down," she finally said, accepting defeat. "It's time you knew the truth." She told them everything. The secret romance, the marriage proposal, the sudden disappearance, the Sterling family's denial, the nights on the streets until she found Mrs. Elena. She spoke of the struggle to raise them alone, of the doors she had knocked on for help. "Why did he abandon us?" Gabriel asked, his small hands clenched into fists. "I don't know for sure," Tavi replied honestly. "Maybe he gave in to family pressure. Maybe he just changed his mind about us." "Does he know we exist?" It was Ethan's turn, always quiet, but now his eyes were bright with contained emotion. "No, by the time I found out about you, he had already disappeared." Aurora, who had remained strangely silent, finally spoke. "We need to show him who we are." "No, honey," Tavi shook her head emphatically. "The Sterlings are powerful. They would destroy us." "We're going to prove who we are, Mom," Aurora countered, her chin raised in defiance. "The truth can't stay hidden forever." That conversation marked the beginning of a transformation. The quintuplets, always close, now had a common purpose. Tavi noticed how they whispered to each other in the corners of the house, how they exchanged meaningful glances during dinner. Theodore spent hours at the public library researching paternity laws. Lucas used his natural charm to extract information from adults. Gabriel meticulously observed everything. Ethan, the shy one, now spoke about justice with a surprising conviction. Aurora, however, was the undisputed leader. At 8, she already showed an emotional intelligence and strategic capacity that was startling. "We're going to need proof, Mom," she declared one day, sitting at the kitchen table while doing homework. "Do you have anything that proves you were together?" Tavi hesitated. In the back of her closet, tucked away in a shoebox, was a folder with all the memories of Alex she had managed to preserve. Photos, letters, a simple engagement ring, and one document. "I have a certificate of engagement," she admitted. Alex insisted on registering it with the city clerk, even though it was symbolic at the time. "He said that way I'd believe he was serious." Aurora's eyes shone. "That's all we need." The next morning at school, Aurora approached her computer teacher, Mr. Robinson, with an unusual question for an 8-year-old. "Sir, how does someone prove they are the child of a rich person who doesn't want to acknowledge them?" Mr. Robinson, a young man with ideals of social justice and a certain resentment toward the elites, looked at the girl with curiosity. In the following months, he would become a crucial ally in the small Roca's quest for justice. Tavi's life and the lives of her 5 children were about to change forever. What she didn't know was that while they were planning their next move, just a few miles away, in the luxurious office of Sterling Global Holdings, Alex was looking out the window at the New York skyline, troubled by recurring dreams of a brown-haired woman whose name he couldn't quite recall. Audience interaction. If you were Tavi, facing a powerful enemy who has manipulated your loved one's memory, would you risk your children's safety to demand the truth in a very public, scandalous way? Tell us, yes, fight fire with fire, or no, protect the children at all costs. The sun had barely risen when Aurora woke her brothers. The 5 shared a single room, with old bunk beds and a chipped wooden dresser that held all their clothes. "Get up," she whispered, nudging Theodore first. He was always the hardest to wake. "We have work to do." In recent months, Mr. Robinson had become more than an ally. He was practically an accomplice. Thanks to him, the quintuplets had gained access to the school's computer lab outside regular hours, under the pretext of a special project. "What are we going to do today?" Lucas asked, always talkative, even in the early hours of the morning. "We're going to assemble our dossier," Aurora replied, pulling a green folder from under her mattress where they kept all the information collected about the Sterling family. "Mr. Robinson is going to help us digitize Mom's documents." Tavi slept on the sofa in the small living room, exhausted after a long day of catering deliveries, followed by a night of studying for her final exam for her nursing technician course. The quintuplets moved silently through the house, accustomed to looking after each other and sparing their mother whenever possible. "Don't you guys think this could go wrong?" questioned Ethan, the most cautious of the 5. "What if they hurt Mom again?" Aurora looked at her brother with determination in her blue eyes. "That's why we're preparing so much. We're not just going to show up, we're going with everything planned." At school, Mr. Robinson waited for them in the empty lab. At 32, the son of a domestic worker who had earned his computer science degree through immense effort, Robinson held a critical view of social inequalities. When Aurora first told him the story, he saw in it not just an injustice to be corrected, but an opportunity to expose the hypocrisy of the capitalist elite. "Did you bring the documents?" he asked as he turned on the computers. Theodore, the most organized, carefully handed him the folder. "Everything is here. The certificate of engagement, the photos, even the old pregnancy test result." "Excellent. We'll scan everything in high resolution and create digital backups. You never know what might happen to the originals." While the teacher worked, the 5 watched intently. Gabriel, curious as ever, asked questions about every step of the process. Lucas already imagined the confrontation, narrating epic scenarios in which the Roca quintuplets, as he liked to call them, triumphed over the villainous Sterlings. Ethan and Theodore remained silent, absorbing every detail, calculating risks, thinking of contingencies. Aurora, however, was one step ahead. "Professor, I found something interesting about Dad," she said, showing him her phone screen. According to this news from 3 years ago, he suffered a serious accident. He was in a coma for 3 weeks. Robinson leaned closer to read. "Sterling Air sustains injuries in New England accident. Interesting, that might explain some things." "Like what?" questioned Theodore, always analytical. "If there was brain trauma, it might have affected his memory," Robinson explained. "Or maybe it was a perfect opportunity for the family to manipulate his recollections, to keep him away from your mother." The idea was disturbing, but it made sense. For years, Tavi had questioned how Alex could simply abandon her when his love seemed so sincere. The possibility of external manipulation offered a less painful explanation than simple rejection. In the days that followed, the quintuplets intensified their research. They discovered that Alex had divorced Victoria Vance 2 years after their marriage, that he had taken over the family presidency after his father, Alistair Sterling, suffered a heart attack, that he had a reputation as a workaholic, rarely seen at social events. "He looks sad," commented Ethan, observing the rare recent photos of Alex they found in business magazines. "Like something is missing." Tavi began to notice the changes in her children. The 5 had always been studious and disciplined, but now they showed an almost obsessive focus. When she asked about the school project they were developing, she received vague answers about social research. It was one Saturday morning, while separating the laundry, that Tavi found the green folder hidden among the school books. Her heart raced as she saw her own young face next to Alex's in photos she hadn't seen in years. The certificate of engagement, yellowed with time, bore the elegant signature of the man who still occasionally populated her dreams. "What is this?" she asked when the children returned from the corner grocery store. The 5 exchanged glances, a silent communication only multiples seemed capable of maintaining. It was Aurora who stepped forward. "We're gathering proof, Mom," she said with the determination of an adult in a child's body, "to show our father who we are." Tavi's face went pale. "I told you not to do this. The Sterlings are dangerous." "We already know everything about them," Theodore calmly replied. "About Grandpa Alistair, who controls everything. About Aunt Clarice, who's a doctor. About Uncle Philip, who works abroad. And we know Dad had an accident," Gabriel completed. "Maybe he doesn't remember you." Tavi sat on the worn sofa, her legs suddenly weak. "You don't understand, it's not that simple." "We understand more than you think, Mom," Lucas said, sitting beside her. "We know you still have the ring he gave you, that you still cry sometimes looking at that box in your closet. And we know we deserve the truth," Aurora concluded, her blue eyes fixed on her mother's. "It's not fair that we live like this when our father has so much. We don't want his money. We just want him to know we exist." Tavi looked at the 5 determined faces in front of her. They were no longer helpless babies. They were intelligent, sharp children who had inherited as much from her as from Alex. Her determination, his intelligence, the courage of both. "How do you plan to do this?" she finally asked, accepting defeat. In the days that followed, Tavi was included in the plan. With her life experience and knowledge about Alex, she could provide valuable details. Her initial reluctance gradually turned into cautious hope. What if Alex truly hadn't abandoned her willingly? What if there was an explanation? Mr. Robinson introduced them to his cousin, attorney James Robinson, a newly graduated lawyer working on social justice cases. Initially skeptical, James changed his mind upon examining the evidence, and especially after meeting the quintuplets. "I've never seen children like that," he commented to Mr. Robinson after their first meeting. "They talk like adults, reason like strategists, and the resemblance to Sterling is undeniable." On the quintuplets' 9th birthday, Tavi made an extraordinary effort to give them a special party. She had saved for months to buy individual gifts that reflected each personality: a chess set for Theodore, a small used digital camera for Lucas, a science kit for Gabriel, a quality sketchbook and pencils for Ethan, and for Aurora, a refurbished tablet a neighbor sold her at cost price. During the modest celebration, with a cake baked by Tavi herself and the presence of Mrs. Elena, Mr. Robinson, and a few schoolmates, Aurora made an unexpected announcement. "In 1 month, we're going to meet our father." Tavi nearly dropped the tray of cupcakes. "How so, Aurora? We didn't agree on that." "There's an event on Park Avenue," Theodore explained. "The inauguration of the new Sterling Global Holdings headquarters. The whole family will be there along with the press. It's our best chance," Gabriel completed. "In public, they won't be able to ignore us or threaten us." The plan was bold, but meticulously thought out. With Attorney James's help, they prepared certified copies of the documents. Mr. Robinson secured fake press passes so they could enter the event. Mrs. Elena recruited members of her church to be present for moral support and as witnesses. "This is insane," Tavi muttered as she helped the children get ready. With borrowed money and clothes bought from a consignment shop, the 5 looked like they were straight out of a children's fashion catalog. Miniature executives, with well-fitting suits for the boys and an elegant dress for Aurora. "That's why it will work," Aurora replied with a confident smile. "No one expects children to do something like this." On the eve of the big day, Tavi woke up in the middle of the night with a strange premonition. She went to check on her children and found Aurora awake, sitting by the window, looking at the starry sky rarely visible through New York's pollution. "Can't sleep?" Tavi asked, sitting down beside her daughter. "I'm thinking about Dad," Aurora replied. "How do you think he's going to react?" "I don't know, my love," Tavi admitted. "But no matter what happens, I want you to know that I am incredibly proud of you. Of all of you." Aurora leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "We're doing this for you too, you know? So you don't have to work so hard." Tavi felt her eyes fill with tears. "I work hard because I love you. I've never regretted choosing you, not even in the darkest moments." The tension was palpable on the morning of the big day. The quintuplets dressed carefully, helping each other with ties and hairstyles. Tavi, at Aurora's insistence, also dressed up. The navy blue dress, bought on sale years ago and saved for special occasions, highlighted her eyes and did justice to the beauty that years of hard work hadn't managed to completely erase. "You look beautiful, Mom," said Ethan, the quietest but most observant. Tavi smiled nervously. She didn't plan to go near the building. She would stay at a distance, ready to intervene only if necessary. The confrontation would be led by Aurora, with her brothers as support. Attorney James would be nearby, as would Mr. Robinson, and a few other strategically positioned allies. The plan was simple in theory. Enter the inauguration cocktail party using the forged passes, approach Alex when he was in public, present the evidence, and demand recognition. In practice, there were 1,000 variables that could go wrong. Park Avenue was especially crowded that Thursday afternoon, in front of the new Sterling Global Holdings building, an imposing structure of glass and steel that rose 30 stories above street level. Security guards in suits controlled the entry of guests. Journalists clustered near the entrance, awaiting the arrival of important personalities. "Remember the plan," Aurora said quietly as they walked toward the building. Theodore and Gabriel enter first with Attorney James, pretending to be his sons. Lucas and Ethan enter afterward with the press passes Mr. Robinson secured. I enter last, alone. "Are you sure you don't want me to go with you?" Tavi asked, her heart pounding with fear. "Yes, Mom," Aurora replied firmly. "If you show up now, they'll recognize you and block you immediately. We are new, they don't know us." Tavi hugged each of her children, trying to hold back tears. "Be careful. If anything goes wrong, get out of there immediately. Attorney James will be watching you." The plan began to unfold. Theodore and Gabriel entered without issue with Attorney James, who had a legitimate invitation obtained through law school contacts. Lucas and Ethan, with their forged junior press assistant credentials, also managed to pass, blending in with a group of photographers. Aurora waited a few minutes, observing. Her heart was beating hard, but her expression was one of absolute calm. At 9 years old, she carried a folder with documents and a determination rarely seen in adults, let alone children. "Can I help you, little one?" a security guard asked when she finally approached the entrance. "I'm looking for my dad," she replied with the most innocent voice she could muster. He works here. What's his name? Aurora looked directly into the man's eyes. Alexander Sterling. The guard laughed. Sure, and I'm Santa Claus. Go play somewhere else, kid. She's with me, a female voice intervened. A young TV reporter approached. She's my niece. She got separated from her parents. Aurora shot a look of gratitude at the woman, one of the allies recruited by Mr. Robinson, and entered the luxurious lobby of the building. The lobby was packed with elegantly dressed people, champagne glasses in hand, artificial laughter echoing off the marble walls. The four brothers were already strategically positioned, as planned. Theodore near the buffet, Gabriel near the stairs, Lucas circulating discreetly with his cell phone, ready to record. And Ethan, the most observant, kept his eyes on the main entrance awaiting Alex's arrival. It was Lucas who spotted him first. Target in sight, he murmured into the small walkie-talkie they shared. Cheap but functional toys for short distances. Alexander Sterling entered the lobby, accompanied by a group of executives. At 38, he was at the height of his physical form and corporate power. His impeccably tailored suit accentuated his aristocratic posture, his light hair carefully combed back, the same gray-blue eyes the quintuplets had inherited. It's our cue, Aurora said into the device. Everyone in position. The five began to move like chess pieces, gradually converging on Alex, who was interrupted mid-sentence while talking to a group of investors near the main staircase. Alex stopped, startled by the sudden appearance of 5 identical children looking directly at him. A strange silence fell over the closest group. Cameras instinctively turned toward the unusual scene. Excuse me, Aurora said in a loud, clear voice. My name is Aurora Elena Rocha. These are my brothers, Ethan Michael, Gabriel Henry, Lucas Raphael, and Theodore Emmanuel. We are your children, Mr. Sterling. Alex's face became a mask of shock. His eyes swept over the 5 faces in front of him, lingering on the features that were mirrors of his own. The same eyes, the same face shape, even the small dimple on the chin that Aurora and Theodore had inherited. What are you talking about? He finally managed to say, his voice husky with surprise. Aurora opened the folder she was carrying, pulling out the certificate of engagement. 10 years ago, you asked our mother, Octavia Rocha, to marry you. Then you disappeared without explanation. She was pregnant with quintuplets, us. The camera flashes intensified. Journalists pressed closer, sensing the bombshell story unfolding before them. Security guards began to move but hesitated, unsure how to act against children. This is absurd, interjected an older man, whom Aurora immediately recognized from photos as Alistair Sterling, the family patriarch. Get these children out of here immediately. We have proof, Theodore replied, stepping forward beside his sister. Preliminary DNA tests, documents, photos. We just want our father to know we exist. Alex seemed hypnotized, his gaze fixed on Aurora, who held his eye contact without flinching. Something in those eyes, the same ones he saw in the mirror every morning, seemed to awaken dormant memories. Octavia, he murmured, more to himself than to the others. It was then that an elegant woman, whom Aurora identified as Constance Sterling, the family matriarch, rushed over. Seeing the quintuplets lined up, her face lost all color. Without saying a word, the woman in her late 60s collapsed to the floor in a sudden faint. Chaos erupted. Guards rushed to assist Constance, while Alistair shouted orders to remove those imposters from the premises. Journalists jockeyed for space to photograph the scene while guests watched open-mouthed. Take the children to my office, Alex suddenly ordered, his voice taking on a commanding tone that silenced even his father. All of them. And call security to prevent any journalist from following them. The quintuplets exchanged triumphant glances. Phase 1 of the plan. Complete. They were inside. Meanwhile, across the street, Tavi watched everything through Mr. Robinson's cell phone, which was live-streaming the images captured by Lucas. Her heart hammered so hard it felt about to break. After 9 years, the truth was finally beginning to emerge. What she didn't know was that in the luxurious Sterling penthouse, an emergency meeting was already being convened by phone. Victoria Sterling, Alex's cousin and family lawyer, was mobilizing a team to contain the growing scandal. And at Massachusetts General Hospital, a specialist in post-traumatic amnesia was receiving an urgent call from Dr. Philip Sterling, Alex's uncle and the family doctor, requesting absolute secrecy about the memory reconstruction case performed years ago. The war for the recognition of the Rocha quintuplets had officially begun, and no one, not even Aurora, with her impressive foresight, could foresee how dirty that battle would become. Meaningful ending. Fan 1. The silence in the ultra-modern office was broken by Alexander's simple question. What did you do to me? The answer, a decade of lies, a stolen memory, and the threat of an empire's collapse, would redefine what the Sterling name truly stood for. The fight for patrimony had begun, but the real prize was the truth. Don't go anywhere. The stunning conclusion is coming right up. The final battle for memory and family. Alex Sterling's private office occupied the entire top floor of the new building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of New York City, the city of contrasts stretching as far as the eye could see. The quintuplets, now seated on a set of Italian leather sofas, seemed like small islands of dignity in an ocean of luxury. You really planned this well, Alex said, standing in front of the window, his back to the children. His voice sounded strangely controlled, almost clinical. You chose the most visible event of the year. You made sure the press was present. We needed to be heard, Aurora replied calmly. Your family has ignored us for 9 years. Alex turned to face the 5. His gaze rested on each face for a few seconds, as if trying to absorb every detail. If what you say is true, I didn't know you existed. Our mother tried to find you, Theodore said, maintaining the respectful yet firm tone they had rehearsed. She came to this very building. Your father sent her away, saying you were in London. A shadow of uncertainty crossed Alex's face. When exactly was that? 10 years ago, Gabriel replied. In August. Something seemed to stir in Alex's memory. He walked slowly to his desk and picked up a photograph frame, face down. It was the only visible personal object in the minimalist office. You look like me when I was a child, he finally said. But that doesn't prove anything. We'll need DNA tests. We already have preliminary results. Lucas pulled another document from the folder. Attorney James Robinson, our lawyer, managed to get hair samples from a brush my mother kept. It's not admissible in court, but it shows a 99.8% probability of paternity. Alex raised an eyebrow, surprised by the children's organization and preparation. Who is your mother, really? Is someone guiding you? Our mother is Octavia Rocha, Ethan replied, speaking for the first time. She works as a nurse and makes catering meals to supplement her income. She has raised us alone, without any help, and we were the ones who planned all this, Aurora completed, with small assists from adults who believed in us. The office door burst open. Alistair Sterling stormed in, followed by Victoria, the lawyer cousin, and 2 large security guards. This ends now, the patriarch declared. These children will be removed from the building immediately, and we will deal with this farce through the appropriate channels. They're not going anywhere, Dad, Alex replied, with a firmness that was surprising. Not until we clarify this situation. What's there to clarify? It's obviously an extortion attempt. Aurora stood up, her blue eyes fixed on the man who was her grandfather. We don't want your money, Mr. Sterling. We want the truth, and we want our father. Insolent! Alistair took a step toward the girl, but Alex placed himself between them. That's enough, Dad. Alex's voice took on a tone no one in the room had heard before. Something isn't right here. I have flashes of memory, a brown-haired woman, an apartment in the Lower East Side. Victoria exchanged a worried look with Alistair. Alex, you're confused. Remember what the doctors said about false memories after the accident? What accident? Theodore immediately asked, his sharp gaze catching the tension in the room. It's none of your business, brat, Alistair snapped. 3 years ago I had an accident, Alex explained, ignoring his father's warning glare. I was in a coma for 3 weeks. I lost some memory of the previous years. Aurora and Theodore exchanged significant glances. It was exactly as they had suspected. "Stop this nonsense," Alistair interrupted. "Victoria, handle this. I want these brats and their supposed lawyer out of my building in 5 minutes." "We're not going anywhere without our father," Gabriel declared, his childish voice firm. Alistair laughed without humor. "Who do you think you are to challenge me, young man? I am Gabriel Henry Rocha, grandson of Don Miguel Rocha and Doña Sofia Rocha. My great-grandfather was Don Antonio Rocha, who helped build this very building as a construction worker in 1972 without ever receiving proper labor rights." The look on Alistair's face was priceless. Aurora smiled. The meticulous research they had done on the history of the first Sterling building was paying off. "Where did you get that information?" Victoria demanded, her professional composure momentarily shaken. "Public records," Theodore simply replied. "It's amazing what you can find when you know where to look." The tension in the room was palpable. It was then that the door opened again, revealing Attorney James Robinson, now accompanied by 2 clerks. "Pardon the interruption," the young lawyer said with a confidence bordering on arrogance. "I have here a court order demanding the preservation of all evidence related to the case, including Mr. Alexander Sterling's medical records concerning the period of his accident." "How did you get that so fast?" Victoria asked, clearly disturbed. "We already had the petition prepared," James replied with a polite smile. "We just needed the right trigger. Thank you for mentioning the accident and the false memories." While the legal battle began to unfold in the office, a new drama was forming in the building's lobby. Tavi, unable to bear the weight any longer, had entered the building, simply dressed but with a natural dignity that no expensive clothing could confer. She drew curious glances from the guests who had not yet left the venue. "I need to see my children," she told the security guard who tried to block her. "Ma'am, we have no record of any authorized children at the event," the man replied, visibly uncomfortable with the growing interest of the journalists still circulating in the lobby. "My 5 children are in Alexander Sterling's office," Tavi insisted, "and if you don't let me go up immediately, I'm going to tell every one of these reporters exactly why." The guard hesitated, aware of the escalating commotion. He was saved by the appearance of Mr. Robinson, who approached accompanied by a reporter from a major news outlet. "This is the children's mother," Mr. Robinson explained to the journalist. "The woman Alexander Sterling abandoned 10 years ago when he found out she was pregnant." Cameras began flashing. Sensing the situation was spiraling out of control, the guard finally gave in. "30th floor, but I'll escort you." In the elevator, Tavi tried to calm her racing heart. It wasn't part of the plan for her to show up so early. Aurora had been emphatic. "Only come when we call you, Mom. We need him to see us first, to know us without prejudice." But fear for her children's safety spoke louder. When the elevator doors opened on the 30th floor, Tavi was met with a surreal scene. The door to Alex's office was open, revealing an intense confrontation between the Sterlings, the clerks, and Attorney James. The quintuplets remained seated on the sofa, watching everything with an impressive calm for children their age. "Mom!" Lucas exclaimed upon seeing her, running toward her. The other 4 followed, forming a protective circle around her. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. All eyes turned toward the brown-haired woman with green eyes who stood in the doorway, surrounded by 5 children. Alex took a step forward, his face pale as if he had seen a ghost. "Octavia!" His voice, speaking her name after so many years, made Tavi tremble. "Hello, Alex. This is ridiculous," Alistair exploded. "Now they're going to tell us this is the supposed mother of those children, the swindler who claims to have had a relationship with my son." "It's not a claim, Mr. Sterling," Tavi replied calmly. "We were together for 3 years. Your son asked me to marry him. 2 weeks later, he disappeared." "Lie. Alex was in Europe at that time, preparing to take over our London office." "No, Dad." Alex's voice sounded strangely distant. "I recognize her. I remember her." Alistair paled. "Impossible. The doctors guaranteed those memories were completely suppressed." The comment escaped like an accidental shot, revealing more than he intended. Attorney James immediately signaled to the clerks, who began taking notes. "What memories were suppressed, Mr. Sterling, and by which doctors exactly?" The patriarch realized his mistake, but it was too late. The expression on Alex's face gradually shifted from confusion to horrified understanding. "What did you do to me?" he asked, facing his father. "The accident wasn't an accident, was it?" "Alex, you're confused," Victoria quickly intervened. "This is exactly what they want, to plant doubts, to manipulate your fragmented memories." But Alex was no longer listening to her. His eyes were fixed on Tavi, as if trying to rescue every piece of memory through that gaze. "You had an apartment in the Lower East Side," he said slowly. "Small, with a balcony where you grew orchids. You had a cat named Frida. You liked Jose's music and dreamed of opening a small nursing clinic in your neighborhood." Silent tears began to run down Tavi's face. "You remember?" "Not completely. They're flashes, fragments." Alex ran a hand through his hair, clearly distraught. "Why can't I remember everything? What did you do to me?" It was Aurora who replied, her childish voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. "They manipulated your memories, Dad. They took advantage of the accident to reprogram you, like a computer being reset." "Absurd!" Alistair exclaimed, but the trembling in his voice betrayed his nervousness. "That girl is inventing conspiracy theories." "Then you won't mind releasing your son's complete medical records," challenged Attorney James, including the names of all the specialists who treated him during the coma and recovery. The tension in the room was cutting. Alex slowly approached Tavi, studying her face as if seeking answers to questions he didn't even know how to ask. "I looked for you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "When I found out I was pregnant, I came here. Your father said you were in Europe, that he had never heard of me." "I was somewhere," Alex replied, fragments of memory surfacing in his mind. "An isolated place. A clinic, maybe. I remember doctors, injections. I thought it was to treat depression." Alistair suddenly changed tactics. "Fine. There was a relationship, a fling, but you were confused, Alex. You were going through a rebellious phase, rejecting your responsibilities to the family. So you admit you knew Octavia Rocha?" Attorney James immediately pressed. "I knew her well enough to know she wasn't suitable for my son," Alistair replied, his tone now deliberately condescending. "A girl of humble origins, without formal education, pursuing the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the U.S., the classic scenario." Tavi took a step forward, her voice firm despite the tears. "I was in my last year of nursing school when I met him. I worked to pay for my studies. Alex sought me out, not the other way around. We fell in love." Something in Tavi's conviction seemed to touch Alex deeply. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if struggling to organize the flashes of memory assaulting his mind. "The ring," he murmured suddenly. "I gave you a sapphire ring. It wasn't expensive, but it was your maternal grandmother's," Tavi completed. "You said that she would want it to go to someone who valued its meaning, not its material worth." The face of Constance Sterling, who had been watching everything silently from across the room after recovering from her faint, shifted into a mask of shock. "My mother's ring? You gave it to her?" I think, yes," Alex replied, rubbing his temples. "The memories are coming back, confused, incomplete." The family matriarch slowly stood up and approached Tavi. Her eyes, the same gray-blue hue that characterized the Sterlings, intensely studied the younger woman. Then her gaze moved to the quintuplets, pausing especially on Aurora. "Only a very special woman would receive that ring," Constance finally said. "My mother made Alistair promise that it would remain in the family, passed down only to the woman the Sterling heir truly loved." "Mother!" Alistair seemed scandalized. "Don't lend credence to this farce." Constance ignored her son. "You still have the ring, girl?" Tavi hesitated, then nodded. "I could never bring myself to part with it, even in the hardest times." The matriarch turned to the quintuplets. "Come here, children. Let me look at you properly." The five exchanged uncertain glances, then obeyed. Constance studied each face meticulously, occasionally touching a chin or a cheek, as if confirming the tangible reality of those beings. "Ethan, Gabriel, Lucas, Theodore, and Aurora," she said, identifying each one correctly, to everyone's surprise. "Ethan, you have an observant gaze, just like your grandfather when he was young. Gabriel, You have your great-grandmother's curiosity. Lucas, you talk like your father did as a child. Theodore, you have the analytical mind of your great-uncle Augustus. And finally, Aurora, you, little one, have the determination and courage that I myself once had, before this family broke me." The declaration caused a stunned silence in the room. Constance turned to her son, her gaze now hard as steel. "What did you do, Alistair? It wasn't enough to manipulate my entire life. You had to do the same to your own son. I did what was necessary to protect this family, this empire." Alistair defended himself. "Alex was throwing away his future for a crush 3 years. Alex's voice suddenly exploded. "We were together for 3 years, Father. It wasn't a fling, a summer romance. I loved her. We planned a life together." The memories seemed to return in waves, increasingly vivid. "I was going to resign from the company presidency. I wanted to start my own business, something smaller, more meaningful. And then you just disappeared," Tavi completed. "Your cell phone off, your apartment empty, as if you had never existed." Alistair suddenly looked much older, the weight of his actions evident in his stooped shoulders. "It was for your own good, Alex. You were destroying your future, throwing away everything we built for generations." "Then admit it," Attorney James pressed. "Admit that you deliberately separated your son from Octavia Rocha, and subsequently used his accident as an opportunity to manipulate his memories, effectively erasing her from his life." The patriarch didn't respond, but his silence was eloquent. "He did more than that," Constance interjected, her voice filled with disgust. "He denied 5 children the right to know their father, and a father the right to watch his children grow." The situation was rapidly spinning out of Alistair's control. Victoria, sensing the change in dynamics, attempted one last legal intervention. "All of this is very emotional, but we need concrete proof. Official DNA tests, document verification. We can't just accept—" "Enough, Victoria," Alex interrupted. "Look at them. Look at me. Do you need more proof than that?" The events could have taken a more civilized course from there. DNA tests would be conducted. Agreements would be negotiated. The truth would be gradually restored. But fate, or perhaps human nature at its darkest, had other plans. In the weeks that followed the initial confrontation, the darkest side of the Sterling family emerged. While Alex struggled to recover his memories through intensive therapy, Alistair plotted behind the scenes. The official DNA test mysteriously disappeared from the lab. Documents began to surface suggesting that Tavi had been a former employee of the company, fired for misconduct. An actress named Fernanda Diaz suddenly appeared in the media, claiming to be Alex's ex-girlfriend and pregnant with his child. Journalists began receiving anonymous dossiers with compromising information about Tavi's past. Attorney James worked tirelessly to combat every new lie, every dirty tactic. The quintuplets, instead of being frightened by the war they had started, seemed strengthened by it. Aurora, especially, became an impressive public figure. Articulate, serene, always ready with intelligent answers when approached by the press. "We are not afraid of the truth," she declared in an improvised interview when leaving school. "That's why the powerful fear children so much. We haven't learned to normalize lies yet." The phrase went viral, becoming a slogan on t-shirts, posters, and social media. Alex, meanwhile, was living his own personal hell. The returning memories brought not only the pain of the forced separation from Tavi, but the shame of the manipulations he had accepted over the years. How could he have been so weak? How could he have allowed his own identity to be rewritten? His relationship with the quintuplets developed slowly, with supervised meetings arranged by Attorney James. The children, surprisingly, showed admirable patience and maturity, understanding that the man in front of them was, in a way, meeting them for the very first time. But the battle was far from over. One seemingly ordinary afternoon, Theodore, the most observant of the brothers, noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the school. When the driver made eye contact with him and quickly looked away, his instinct screamed in alarm. "Something's wrong," he murmured to Aurora. "That man is watching us." The quintuplets had developed a code over the years, a method of communication they used when they needed to alert each other without adults noticing. Within minutes, everyone was aware of the possible threat. "Let's maintain the standard formation," Aurora decided. "Lucas and Gabriel in front, Ethan and Theodore on the sides, me in the back. If something happens, execute the protocol." The protocol was simple. Scream, film, run to public places, call the emergency number Mr. Robinson had configured on the cell phone they shared. They had barely left the school gate when the two men got out of the car, now accompanied by a woman. All three wore ordinary clothes, but something in their posture screamed professional. "Hello, children," the woman said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You are the little Sterlings, aren't you? We've come to pick up Theodore for a special meeting with his father." Aurora immediately activated the recording on the cell phone hidden in her jacket pocket. "Our father didn't mention any meeting today." "It was a last-minute surprise," the man replied, taking a step forward. "Just Theodore today. Man-to-man business." The five instinctively backed away. "We're not going anywhere without our mother knowing," Theodore declared firmly. The woman's smile vanished. "We weren't asking, child." That's when the man grabbed Theodore's arm. In seconds, chaos erupted. Lucas began screaming at the top of his lungs while Gabriel ran back to the school gate yelling for help. Ethan threw himself against the man, trying to free his brother. Aurora, with incredible presence of mind, continued filming while shouting their exact location. The kidnapping was thwarted by the quick intervention of teachers and parents leaving the school. The two strangers fled, but not before Aurora managed to get a clear photo of their faces and the license plate. The incident was the final straw. When Alex learned of the kidnapping attempt, something inside him finally broke. All the doubts, all the confusion that still hovered over his partially recovered memories, gave way to a crystalline clarity. "It's over," he declared in an emergency meeting of the Sterling Global Holdings Board. "I am taking full control of the company today. My father is removed from all positions of power, effective immediately." The room erupted in protests, quickly silenced when Alex slammed a USB drive onto the table. "Here is all the evidence of the manipulation, the lies, the kidnapping attempts. If anyone wants to challenge my decision, feel free, but know that this content goes directly to the Attorney General's office and all major news media in the country." Dr. Philip Sterling, the medical uncle who had supervised Alex's therapy after the accident, stood up trembling. "Alex, you need to understand. We did what we thought was best for you, for the family." "Best?" Alex laughed without humor. "You tried to kidnap my son, threatened the mother of my children, manipulated my memories. That's not family. That's a criminal organization." That same night, Alex showed up at Tavi's small house in the Bronx. He was alone, without a driver or security guards. When she opened the door, surprised by his unannounced visit, he simply said, "I remember everything. The first day we met, at the university where you were doing your practicals. Our first kiss in the park. How you laughed when I tried to cook and always burned the rice." Silent tears streamed down Tavi's face. Inside the house, the quintuplets watched the scene through the crack in the bedroom door, holding their breath. "I remember the day I proposed to you, how you cried and said I was crazy, that it would never work. And I said some craziness is worth it," Tavi completed, her voice choked with emotion. Alex took a step forward, taking her hands. 10 years were lost. 10 years I can never get back. I will never forgive myself for not being there." "It wasn't your fault," Tavi replied, squeezing his hands. "You were a victim too. Even so, I want you to know that I will do everything to make up for lost time, not just with material resources, but with love, presence, and unconditional support." That's when Aurora could no longer contain herself. She emerged from her hiding place, followed by her brothers, and ran to the door. "You really remember everything, Dad?" she asked, her blue eyes shining with hope. Alex looked at the five, an emotional smile lighting up his face. "Not everything yet, but every day I remember a little more, and the most important part is already here." He touched his own chest. "The love I feel for you, the certainty that you are my children, the immense pride in the strength and courage you have shown." That night marked the beginning of a new phase. It was not an instant happy ending. There were deep wounds to be healed, a decade of absence to make up for, a corporate empire to reform. But it was an honest start. In the months that followed, radical changes occurred. Tavi was finally able to complete her nursing degree with Alex's full support, who insisted she not abandon her dreams. The quintuplets, now with access to quality education, constantly impressed their teachers with their natural intelligence and teamwork. Alistair Sterling was completely removed from the business, retreating to a remote family property. Victoria and Philip faced ethical proceedings in their respective professional colleges. Constance, the matriarch, surprisingly, became a fervent ally of Tavi and the children, as if trying to redeem decades of silent complicity with her son's manipulations. The story of the Rocha-Sterling quintuplets captured the public's imagination. Aurora, with her precocious eloquence, became a symbol for children from marginalized communities, often invited to speak in public schools. "The truth cannot be hidden," she would say in her impromptu speeches. "Children are not a disgrace. Being poor is not a crime." The phrase eventually adorned t-shirts, posters, and even tattoos. Alex, fulfilling the promise he made years ago and then forgot, founded an organization dedicated to providing quality education and opportunities for young people from the periphery. He named it Aurora Foundation, in honor of the daughter who led the revolution in his life. When the quintuplets turned 10, a new celebration was held, not in the small Bronx apartment, but in the spacious garden of the house Alex had bought for Tavi, modest by Sterling standards, but large enough for 5 energetic children. Everyone who had helped along the way was present. Mrs. Elena with her colorful shawl, Mr. Robinson and attorney James, the public school teachers who had always believed in the Five's potential, even some of the old neighbors from the Bronx. During the party, Alex called Tavi to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the guests. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "It's not the same ring," he explained, opening the box to reveal a delicate sapphire ring. "That one had a special meaning for who we were. This one symbolizes who we have become." Tavi looked at the jewel with tear-filled eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you again?" "I'm asking for a second chance," he replied. "A chance to build what we planned 10 years ago, but now stronger, wiser, with 5 incredible reasons never to give up." Before she could answer, the quintuplets appeared behind them, obviously having spied on the entire scene. "Say yes, Mom," pleaded Lucas, always the most effusive. "Technically, she never said no the first time," Theodore observed, pragmatic as ever. "So it would just be a confirmation, a formalization of what we already are," Gabriel agreed, nodding enthusiastically. "A family," Ethan simply completed. Aurora, looking at the ring in the box, looked up at her mother. Her gaze conveyed not only support for the decision, whatever it might be, but a deep respect for the path Tavi had traveled alone for so many years. "What do you want, Mom?" the girl asked. "That's what matters." Tavi looked at the 6 faces in front of her, the 5 children who had been her reason for living through the difficult years, and the man who, against all odds, had found his way back to them. The journey had been painful, full of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, but here they were, against all expectations. "Yes," she finally replied, a smile illuminating her face. "Yes to all of you." The quintuplets erupted in celebration, hugging the 2 adults in a chaos of arms and laughter. At the official launch of the Aurora Foundation 3 months later, Tavi surprised everyone with an announcement. In addition to serving as the head nurse for the health program for marginalized communities, she had been accepted into medical school. "It's never too late to start over," she declared to an emotional audience. "That's the most important lesson my children taught me." Aurora, now a minor celebrity, gave her first formal interview to a national magazine. When asked how she felt about the whole journey, from poverty in the Bronx to being recognized as a sterling heiress, the girl replied with her characteristic wisdom. "We were never truly poor. We had our mother's love, the solidarity of people like Mrs. Elena, the education our teachers diligently provided. Money is just a detail. What really matters is the courage to fight for what is right, even when everyone says it's impossible." The visibly moved reporter asked if Aurora held any resentment toward her grandfather and the family members who tried to prevent her recognition. "We don't waste time on resentment," the girl replied, after a reflective pause. "We prefer to build our future. But we also don't forget, because he who forgets history is doomed to repeat it." The cover story, titled "The Five Against the Empire: How Children from the Periphery Challenged One of America's Most Powerful Families," became the best-selling edition of the magazine that year. In an ironic twist of fate, it was Alistair Sterling who suffered from the manipulation of his own memories in the following years. The patriarch, isolated on his rural property, gradually lost touch with reality. The guilt for what he had done, coupled with self-imposed solitude, took its toll. When Alex visited him for the last time, the old man barely recognized him. "He is no longer a threat," Alex recounted to Tavi after the visit. "Just a broken man, broken by his own greed. Still, we must be careful," she replied, always protective. "People can change, but they rarely change completely." Tavi and Alex's wedding took place on the same day as the quintuplets' 11th birthday, a double celebration that symbolized the intertwining of their histories. The ceremony, held in a community garden that the Aurora Foundation had restored in the outskirts of New York, brought together people from all walks of life, from homeless people Tavi had treated as a volunteer nurse to influential executives who now aligned with Sterling Global Holdings' new social vision. As a wedding gift, the quintuplets prepared a special surprise, a multimedia presentation documenting the family's entire journey. Theodore had programmed it, Gabriel researched the facts, Lucas wrote the script, Ethan created the illustrations, and Aurora narrated the story in her clear, confident voice. "This is not just the story of how we found our father," Aurora concluded the presentation. "It is the story of how an ordinary woman achieved the extraordinary simply by refusing to give up. It is the story of how 5 children discovered that the truth, when revealed with courage and intelligence, can tear down even the highest walls of injustice." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden when the presentation ended. Tavi, now officially Octavia Rocha Sterling, hugged her 5 children, amazed by the strength and wisdom they displayed. "You are the best of me," she whispered. "My greatest pride." "And mine too," Alex added, joining the embrace. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't know who I was." The story of the Rocha Sterling quintuplets continued to inspire America in the years that followed. Aurora eventually followed her mother's footsteps into medicine, specializing in neurology with a focus on brain trauma, a choice clearly influenced by her father's history. Theodore revolutionized the family company's technology department, creating digital inclusion programs for peripheral communities. Lucas, with his natural gift for communication, became an award-winning documentarian, giving voice to stories similar to his own. Gabriel, always curious, dedicated himself to scientific research focused on sustainable solutions in marginalized communities. And Ethan, the quietest and most observant, found his voice through social architecture, redesigning urban spaces to promote integration and dignity. Together, they transformed not only their own lives, but began to slowly change the structures of power and privilege that had tried to keep them invisible. With every obstacle overcome, with every new achievement, they proved that a person's true worth lies not in their surname or bank account, but in the courage to face injustice and the determination to create a better world for all. Thus, the story that began with abandonment and despair transformed into a powerful testament that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with the small, determined steps of those who refuse to accept that their place in the world be determined by others. This story contains a brutal truth about the choices we make. If you believe second chances are possible, you need to smash that subscribe button right now. Hit like and comment to share your reflections on the moment a billionaire's empire collided with his secret family. The terminal lockdown. The storm outside wasn't just roaring, it was pressing. Snow piled against the windows of O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, muffling the glare of the runway lights until the glass itself looked like frosted stone. The announcements repeated on loop over the loudspeakers, the same two words flashing on every departures board. Delayed. Passengers moaned, cursed, laughed nervously. Children sprawled across carry-on bags. Couples argued in hushed tones. Business travelers stabbed at their phones with frustration. The airport had become a clockless waiting room. Through the sliding doors of Concourse B, a figure entered from the jet bridge. Elias Thorne moved with the quiet stride of someone accustomed to private lounges and polished boardrooms. At 39, CEO of one of America's fastest-growing tech firms, his name carried weight on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley. His tailored coat and noise-canceling headphones separated him from the sea of restless travelers. Yet, pausing at the edge of the crowded seating area, he removed his headphones. For the first time that day, he listened. Not to investors, not to analysts, but to the raw clamor of people stranded together by the weather. Elias adjusted the strap of his leather carry-on bag. He could have retreated to the VIP lounge, ordered champagne, and buried himself in emails. But something propelled him forward, an impulse he couldn't name. Then he saw them. A woman in a simple winter coat sat near gate C-23. 3 identical children were pressed against her. Their sneakers swung over the floor in unison. Each held a packet of airline pretzels, the kind given out as if they counted as dinner. Elias's breath hitched in his chest. He knew the curve of that woman's shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she thought no one was looking. Audrey. For 7 years, he hadn't spoken her name aloud. 7 years since the papers were signed. Since she had walked out of his life carrying more than he ever realized. Now she looked up. Their eyes met across the terminal. In that instant, the air between them froze harder than the storm outside. And then he saw the children clearly. All 3 pairs of sharp brown eyes, pointed jaws, restless energy. Triplets. Every feature was his, repeated 3 times. Elias gripped the handle of his bag tighter. He had given speeches to presidents, signed multi-billion-dollar deals under blinding cameras. Nothing had ever shaken him like this sight. He took a step forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Audrey?" She rose slowly, interposing herself between him and the children like a shield. Her reply was cold, even, every word chosen like a blade. "You should go back to your VIP lounge, Elias. No one here needs you." The triplets peered over her shoulders with large, fixed eyes. The storm moaned against the glass. Somewhere above, another announcement declared the obvious. All flights delayed until further notice. Elias Thorne, billionaire visionary, master of control, stood rooted to the tiled floor, undone not by a market crash or a hostile takeover, but by the family he never knew was his. 2. The scrutiny of the world. The storm rattled against the glass walls. Inside, the terminal buzzed with restless movement. Suitcases dragged. Children cried. Announcements echoed over and over. All flights remained delayed. Elias didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on Audrey. She shifted her stance, staying firmly between him and the children. The triplets, Finley, Liam, and Asher, clung to her coat. Their gazes darted back and forth, too curious to look away. Elias took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "Audrey, they're mine, aren't they?" "Aren't they?" She raised her chin. "Not here. I deserve an answer." "What you deserve," she cut him off, her voice low but sharp, "is the truth you chose to ignore 7 years ago. I was in a hospital bed alone, giving birth to 3 children. You were in the sky, chasing another contract. Don't feign surprise now." The words hit harder than any headline or boardroom brawl he had ever faced. Elias swallowed, his throat dry. He looked at the children, their mirrored faces, restless feet, nervous hands clutching snack packs. His chest constricted. "Audrey," he tried again, softer this time. "Let me at least say hello." She shook her head. "You don't get to show up after 7 years and decide you're a father. They are not your press release. They are my children." Her voice caught slightly on that last line, but she held firm. Elias's hand dropped to his side, tightening on his phone. He had built entire companies on timing and strategy. Yet here, every instinct told him he had no control. Then, a flash. A camera phone raised from the far side of the waiting area. Someone zoomed in, snapping a photo of the billionaire CEO standing face to face with a woman and 3 children who looked exactly like him. A murmur swept through the crowd. The photo spread to another screen, then another. Shared. Whispered about. Tweeted. The words formed like sparks igniting dry grass. CEO Sterling has a secret family? Identical triplets spotted with tech mogul in Chicago. Within minutes, the news had left the terminal, climbing into the internet storm. Elias's phone vibrated violently. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Veronica Royce, his CFO. The woman holding his multi-billion-dollar merger alive. Audrey saw the expression on his face and knew. Her eyes narrowed. And here it comes. The headlines. The gossip. The cameras. Exactly why I never wanted you near them. The triplets fidgeted, sensing the tension, though they didn't understand the words. One tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, can we go home now?" "Soon," she whispered. Then she looked at Elias, fire in her eyes. "You've done enough damage. Don't make it worse." Elias's phone vibrated again, insistent. He ignored it. For once, the contract could wait. He wasn't going to abandon this space. Not when the truth of 7 years stood right in front of him, alive and undeniable. The waiting area grew louder, not with boarding calls, but with whispers. Screens glowed with headlines that had traveled faster than the snowstorm outside. Passengers pointed, some discreet, others bold enough to raise their phones again. Elias ignored the buzzing in his pocket, but the expression on Audrey's face hurt more than any notification. Her jaw was tight, her hand pressed firmly on one of the children's backs, as if shielding him from the world. "Congratulations," she said quietly, her voice edged with steel. "You just handed them a story that will follow these children for the rest of their lives." Elias's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this." Audrey's eyes flashed. "No, but you created it. Every camera in this terminal sees you, not them. To them, they'll never just be children. They'll be your scandal." Before Elias could reply, the speaker crackled overhead. "Attention passengers. All flights remain delayed until further notice. Please remain in your designated areas." Groans filled the terminal. The storm outside wasn't moving, and neither was the one inside. The triplets huddled closer to their mother, restless now. One tugged her sleeve. Another whispered, "Mommy, why are people looking at us?" She knelt down, her voice soft only for them. "Because people are bored. Ignore them." But ignoring it was impossible. A man in a business suit approached, holding up his phone. "Mr. Thorne, is this your family?" His voice was loud, intentional. Others turned to listen. Audrey shot to her feet. "We're done here!" She snatched up her carry-on handle, ready to pull the children away. Elias instinctively stepped forward. "Audrey, wait!" She cut him off without turning. "Don't follow us." But the crowd did. They didn't care about her warning. They cared about the billionaire who was suddenly not alone. In that moment, Elias's phone lit up again, and this time he answered. Veronica's voice ripped through the line, sharp and urgent. "Elias, what the hell is going on? There are pictures everywhere. Investors are calling. If you don't control this now, our deal is dead." Elias looked around. Dozens of eyes. Flashes, whispers. None of this was controllable. Not anymore. He lowered his voice. Veronica, I'm handling it. You better, she snapped. Because right now the market thinks you've been hiding children. That's not just personal, it's corporate suicide. The line cut off. Elias slowly lowered the phone, looking across the terminal. Audrey was sitting again. The children huddled at her sides, her posture rigid but tired. She hadn't run. Not yet. The storm outside rattled the windows again, but Elias knew the real storm was already here, and for the first time in years, the decision he faced wasn't about shareholders or deals. It was about whether to keep walking toward the woman and children who had every right to hate him, or to retreat again into the world that had left him empty. Elias took a step forward. Audience interaction. Do you think Veronica's threat is enough to make Elias choose his corporation over his family? Or is the public exposure forcing him to finally choose Audrey? Comment your prediction. The line in the sand. Elias had taken that first step toward Audrey and the children when a sudden burst of light exploded through the terminal. A paparazzo, bolder than the rest, had leaned over a rope barrier, snapping rapid photos of the triplets by her side. Look this way, just one photo, the man shouted, his camera flashing again. Audrey shot up, her hands extended protectively over her children. Stop it! Her voice cracked across the terminal, raw and sharp, but the man ignored her, moving closer. The children squeezed against her, frightened by the noise and the strangers. One buried his face in her coat. The others clutched her arms. Elias moved instinctively. He closed the distance with long strides, interposing himself between the photographer and his family. His voice, controlled but harsh, cut through the chaos. Delete those photos, now! The man smirked, lowering the camera only slightly. Too late, Thorne. The world has seen them, and they'll pay to see more. Gasps rippled through the expectant crowd. Audrey's shoulders trembled with fury. You see? This is what your world does. It doesn't care who it crushes. Before Elias could respond, security rushed over, escorting the photographer away. But the damage was done. Dozens of other passengers had their phones raised now, some recording, others snapping photos, their whispers rising to a hum that filled the concourse. Audrey pulled the children closer, her face pale but resolute. She whispered, though her words were loud enough for Elias to hear. This ends the moment we leave. When the storm lifts, we'll be gone. Forever. Elias felt the words like a blow. But in that same instant, his phone vibrated again. Veronica's name glowing on the screen. He didn't need to answer to know her message. Control it, or lose everything. He pocketed the phone without a word. His gaze went to the three small faces peering out from behind their mother's arms. Fear, confusion, and something more. Curiosity. For years, Elias had been untouchable, moving from deal to deal, never pausing long enough to see what he had lost. But now, with the storm outside locking them all together, he realized there was no deal big enough to shield him from the truth standing before him. He knelt slightly, enough to look the children over their mother's shoulder. His voice was softer now, but firm. You don't have to be afraid. No one is going to hurt you, not while I'm here. Audrey stiffened, but she didn't stop him. And though the crowd still buzzed, though Veronica's calls still lit up his phone, though the storm outside showed no sign of breaking, Elias knew. Something had changed. For the first time in years, he hadn't chosen the business. He had chosen them. 4. The public confession. The screens above the gate, where flight statuses flashed red, now showed a newsfeed. A headline scrolled across it. The Sterling Secret family? Billionaire CEO seen with 3 identical children at Denver airport. Audrey gasped. She pulled her hood over her face, but it was useless. Dozens of eyes were fixed on her and the children. The children pressed against her, scared by the escalating attention. Elias stood rooted, watching the headline burn on the screen. For years, his empire had seemed untouchable, forged by endless work, watertight deals, and careful control. Now a storm, a photograph, and everything trembled. His phone buzzed again. Veronica. This time he answered. Her voice cut the line, sharp and cold. Elias, you have to leave right now. Don't speak. Don't look at them. Security will escort you and deny everything. He looked at Audrey, who clutched the children tighter, her face pale but fierce. Leave. The word scratched him, echoing the same mistake that broke them years ago. No, Elias said simply. Veronica's voice rose, incredulous. Do you understand what you're throwing away? The Sterling Hyatt merger is worth $2 billion, and you're about to sink it over a photo of 3 kids we don't even know are yours. Elias's reply was steady, though his pulse pounded in his ears. I know enough. They are mine. Silence on the line. Then, Veronica's fury poured out. Then you have chosen chaos. Don't expect me to clean it up. The call ended abruptly. Audrey turned to him. Her eyes were burning. What did she say? That I should leave. And? He held her gaze. I didn't. For the first time, Audrey faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The children looked between them, sensing something unspoken but important. An announcement broke the silence. All departures remain indefinitely delayed. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the glass. Audrey exhaled sharply, her voice brittle but controlled. Then you better learn fast, Elias, because if you're going to stay in this mess, you can't hide behind your company anymore. These are children, not shareholders. The children tugged at her sleeve, hungry and restless. With the food court nearly empty, Audrey hesitated. Then she shoved a bag of snacks into Elias's hands. Prove it, she said dryly. Start with something as simple as feeding your children. Elias froze for an instant, the words sinking deeper than she knew. He looked down at the 3 pairs of identical eyes staring up at him. Not employees, not partners, not numbers on a deal sheet. Children. He knelt, opening the bag, offering the pretzels carefully. The youngest, Finley, reached first, then the others, their small hands brushing his. It wasn't much, just a snack in a storm. But it was a beginning. V. The battle for a safe space. From the crowd, a man in a heavy coat pushed through, microphone in hand, a cameraman right behind him. His voice rang out, sharp, audible to the stranded passengers. Mr. Thorne, is it true you abandoned this family? Did you even know these children existed? Gasps swept the concourse. Phones went up, recording. The children shrank against Audrey's legs, their small bodies trembling. Elias's jaw clenched. He had faced hostile investors, court battles, regulators. Nothing compared to this. 3 children looking to him for safety while the world demanded answers. He didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped in front of Audrey and the children, squaring his shoulders against the cameras. His voice was firm, deliberate. I will answer, Elias said, his eyes fixed on the reporter. But not here, not with my children, in the middle of this chaos. The words slipped out before he could stop himself. My children. Audrey stiffened. The triplets' eyes widened, as if hearing something impossible. The reporter pressed closer, relentless. So you admit they're yours? Elias didn't flinch. I admit they deserve better than this circus. He motioned sharply to security. Clear a room, now. The damage was spreading online. Tweets, live streams, headlines forming in real time. Audrey's breathing quickened. Fury still burned in her eyes, but underneath it was something else. Conflict. Confusion. The slightest crack in the wall she had built for 7 years. The security cleared a small room, but the reporters still pressed in. Elias stood before the crowd, his travel-worn suit a symbol of his 2 lives. He didn't wait for Veronica's next call. He looked at the reporters. His chest rose. Then, he steadied himself. 7 years ago, Elias began. I made choices that cost me more than I understood. I missed the birth of my children because I thought a contract mattered more. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Audrey's lips parted slightly, surprised by the direct confession. Elias continued, his voice firm but raw. I didn't know they were here today. I didn't even know they were mine. But now I do, and I won't pretend otherwise. A reporter quickly shot back. So what are you saying, Mr. Thorne? Are you abandoning your company for them? Elias looked over his shoulder. The 3 children huddled together, their faces pale with fear and fatigue. Then his eyes met Audrey's. For the first time, she didn't look like an adversary. She looked like someone silently asking if he would truly stay where he had never been before. His answer was simple, but it hit like a hammer. I am saying I am their father, before I am anyone's CEO. The flashes erupted. Some gasps turned to applause from the stranded passengers. Behind him, Audrey's arms loosened slightly around the children. For years, she had only seen Elias choose contracts. Now, in the middle of a snow-covered terminal, he had chosen something else. 6. The final thrust and the run. Elias's phone vibrated again. A new notification lit up the screen, headline after headline. Only this time, the angle had changed. Sterling's ex hid kids for 7 years. Demanding money? Was airport scene staged? Audrey froze as a reporter shoved a tablet close to her face. The article was cruel. It claimed she had deliberately concealed the children, that she was now exploiting them for financial gain. Her chest constricted. She spun instinctively to shield the children as cameras snapped in her direction. Mr. Thorne? Another reporter pressed. Is it true the mother hid your children all these years? Did she keep them from you to force a payout? The children winced at the harsh tone. One clutched Audrey's sleeve. She leaned down, whispering, Don't listen, my love. Stay close. Elias stepped forward, raising his hand. His voice cut cleanly through the chaos. Enough. None of you were there. None of you know what it cost her to raise them alone. The room fell silent, stunned by the sudden defense. The cameras captured every syllable. Audrey's head snapped toward him. For years, she had braced herself for him to dismiss her, to paint her as bitter or demanding. Instead, in front of strangers, he drew the fire onto himself. Elias didn't waver. If anyone failed here, it was me. I wasn't there when I should have been. But don't twist this to blame her. She carried what I left behind, and these children deserve better than your headlines. The silence broke under the weight of those words. The strategy of his CFO, Veronica, had been clear. Destroy Audrey's credibility to save the company. But Elias had just broken the script, returning the focus to himself. The storm outside refused to break. The airport felt like a city trapped under glass. The children had fallen half asleep in plastic chairs, their small heads resting on Audrey's lap. Audrey caught his gaze and said dryly, You can still leave. Pretend none of this happened. Her words hurt, but Elias leaned forward. And leave you to carry this alone? Not this time. Before she could respond, an announcement crackled over the speakers. Attention! Limited boarding will resume shortly at Gate 14. The concourse erupted. Passengers scrambled for bags, dragging children and luggage toward the gate. The sudden surge woke the children. We're going, Audrey said, determination in her face. She pulled the handle of her suitcase with one hand and clutched her children's hands with the other. Before this gets any worse, Elias stood, his voice low but urgent. Audrey, no. Let's go together, please. But she shook her head. You had your chance years ago. Tonight proved one thing. The closer we are to you, the more the world tears us apart. Her words cut deeper than Veronica's threats. He opened his mouth, but no reply came out. The family moved with the crowd toward security. Then it stopped being normal. Finley's small hand slipped from Audrey's grip. In the crushing of bodies, he stumbled backward, then sideways, swallowed by the stream of rushing passengers. His small figure disappeared behind rolling suitcases and hurried legs. "Finley," Audrey's voice cracked. She spun her head left and right, her heart racing as she pulled the other two children closer. "Finley?" The names cut the air, urgent and raw. Passengers turned, murmuring, "Careless mother. Those kids shouldn't be here." The words burned her ears, shame mixing with panic. She fought her way through, scanning the aisle, her breath short. Elias's instincts took over. He dropped his carry-on bag, pushing against the tide of people. "Finley!" His voice was louder, commanding, reaching across the terminal. Somewhere beyond the crowd, a small sob answered. The faint sound of a child, lost and scared. Audrey's chest tightened. Tears sprang despite her will. She had held everything together for years, but in that moment, she felt it slipping away. The judgment, the cameras, the storm, all faded, replaced by the one thought ringing in her mind. Find my son. And Elias, running, searching, fighting strangers, was the one charging into the chaos. The climax was about to begin. 7. The father's choice. Elias's voice boomed above the chaos, deeper than the murmur, sharper than the rolling announcements. He pushed against the stream of passengers, scanning every corner. Finley's faint sobs echoed weakly, swallowed by the drag of suitcase wheels and hurried footsteps. The boy had slipped past the rope barrier, lost in the current of strangers heading for security. For a man who had once commanded boardrooms in multi-billion-dollar negotiations, seeing him now, shoulders hunched, hair damp with sweat, desperately weaving through the crowd, was something no camera could manipulate. This was not strategy. This was a father looking for his son. A flash of movement, a small figure huddled near a vending machine, knees hugged tightly. Finley's toy plane lay forgotten on the floor beside him. His face was tear-streaked. Elias dropped to his knees, breathless. "Finley," his voice softened. "It's me. It's Daddy." The boy's eyes widened, trembling. "You'll leave again, like before. Mommy said you weren't there." The word hit Elias harder than any headline. He swallowed, forcing air into his lungs. "You're right. I wasn't there when you came into this world. I should have been. But I am here now, and I will not leave you again. Never." He reached out, palms open, steady despite the storm raging inside him. Finley hesitated, tears pooling. Then, with a choked sob, the boy lunged forward, burying his face in Elias's chest. Elias wrapped him in his arms, holding him tight, as if anchoring them both. For a fleeting second, the noise of the airport vanished. It was just a father and his son, finding each other in the chaos. Audrey fought her way through the last part of the crowd, breathless, the twins tugging at her hands. When she saw Finley clinging to Elias, something shattered inside her. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Elias stood up, lifting Finley against his shoulder. His voice was firm but tender. "We're going together. All of us." The concourse fell silent. Passengers who had murmured careless mother moments before now watched in quiet, some with softened eyes. The cameras clicked, but for once the lens wasn't capturing scandal. It was recording redemption. Audrey's eyes met Elias's across the small space between them. For years, she had only seen ambition in his gaze. Tonight, she saw something else. A father who chose his child over the world. And for the first time, she did not look away. "Je te..." The quiet choice and the rebuilt home hours. Later, the storm began to abate. Flights were rescheduled and lines advanced. But when their turn came, Elias placed a hand on Audrey's arm before she could hand over the tickets. "Come with me," he said. Not as passengers heading separate ways, but as a family. Audrey hesitated, the boarding gate gleaming behind her like an escape route. But then Finley tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, I want to stay with Daddy." The twins nodded, their voices soft but firm. "Me too." Audrey's throat closed. She closed her eyes for a moment, then lowered the tickets. When she opened them again, she found Elias watching her, waiting, not with pressure, but with hope. She nodded slightly, and just like that, the plane took off without them. Weeks later, spring sunlight poured over a backyard, melting the memory of the snow. The triplets ran barefoot across the grass, their laughter echoing like music. A kite dipped and soared above them, briefly snagging before climbing again. Audrey leaned against the porch railing, her hair brushed back by the breeze. She no longer carried the same exhaustion in her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to watch her children play, without the constant weight of being both mother and father. Elias walked out with 2 mugs of coffee. He set one by her hand, the other warming his own. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled up. A man who had finally learned there was more to life than board wings. "They've been like this since morning?" Audrey said, a slight smile pulling at her lips. "Let them," Elias replied. "This is the sound I've been missing my whole life." She turned to study him, still tired, but softened. "And when the next big deal calls?" He held her gaze. "Then I'll tell them my family is non-negotiable." The silence lingered, not heavy, but tender. Slowly, Elias reached for her hand. For a heartbeat, Audrey considered pulling away as she had countless times before. But this time, she didn't. Their fingers intertwined, a quiet promise stronger than any headline. The triplets laughed, filling the air like an answer. The camera of the world had once captured them under the harsh light of scandal. Now, if anyone looked, they would only see what was always missing. A home rebuilt, piece by piece. The greatest measure of success is not where we land, but who is waiting for us when we arrive. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story, if it touched your heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Every day we bring you more powerful cinematic stories of love, courage, and redemption. Stay tuned. Life After the Empire, the true test of redemption. 9. The CEO meets domestic chaos. The first few months of Elias's new life were a study in contrast. He had successfully dismantled his corporate holdings, trading in his power suits for soft sweaters and his private jet for the family minivan. The peace was real, but it wasn't quiet. It was filled with the beautiful, non-negotiable chaos of 3 7-year-olds. Elias quickly learned that managing the logistics of Finley, Liam, and Asher, all with different homework, different snack preferences, and synchronized tantrums, was more complex than any global merger. He didn't just step in, he plunged into the deep end. He became the early morning breakfast cook, the after-school tutor, and the chief engineer of endless bedtime delays. His greatest business skill, problem-solving, was constantly tested by crises like a burst pipe in the basement or the dreaded synchronized stomach flu. One brutal Tuesday night, the storm inside the house was worse than any snowstorm. Finley started with a high fever, followed by Liam, and then Asher. The small house was instantly overwhelmed by sick day demands, sticky thermometers, and 3 boys needing to be held at the exact same moment. Audrey, who had handled these crises alone for years, was exhausted, but instinctively took the lead. She worked tirelessly, moving from one bed to the next. Elias, despite his best intentions, felt the old panic rising. He was a man who handled systems, not sickness. His impulse was to throw money at the problem, call a private nurse, charter a clean jet to the best children's hospital. Audrey caught his eye as he frantically tried to organize the used washcloths. "Stop trying to manage the chaos, Elias," she said softly, but firmly, her own fatigue showing. "Just be the anchor in it." He finally understood. This was not a problem to be solved. It was a reality to be lived through. He didn't need a strategy. He needed to show up. He put down the phone, picked up the quietest boy, Asher, and simply held him, rocking him gently against his chest. For 2 hours, he stood there, letting the chaos swirl, his shirt getting sticky, his back aching, until Asher finally fell into a calm, deep sleep. He didn't fix the flu. He didn't cure the fever. But he was there, absorbing the mess without complaint or escape. When Audrey finally sank into a chair, overwhelmed, Elias was there to gently hand her a clean blanket and a cup of lukewarm tea. She looked at him, not with gratitude, but with the quiet acknowledgement of a partner who had passed the test of mundane endurance. This was the true redemption, the consistent willingness to be present in the unglamorous, messy reality of their lives. Audience interaction. Which moment do you think is a bigger test of commitment? A CEO leaving a multi-billion-dollar deal, or a father staying up all night with a sick child? Comment your thoughts below. X. The final whisper of the past. Just as the flu subsided and life returned to its steady rhythm, the universe sent one final tempting offer. Veronica Royce, his former CFO, now CEO, called. She wasn't asking for him to return. Instead, she offered him an unprecedented consulting deal. $50 million for 6 weeks of remote strategy work. No travel, no public commitment, purely intellectual. "It's easy money, Elias," Veronica's voice purred over the phone. "It's a legacy project. It's what you were born to do. It's your chance to prove you haven't gone soft." Elias listened, the numbers flashing in his mind. Enough wealth to guarantee the triplets' future, the foundation's stability, and total financial freedom for Audrey. The old, familiar hum of intellectual challenge began to vibrate in his chest. The timing, however, was terrible. The next Saturday was the triplets' first major father-daughter dance at their elementary school, a big, highly anticipated event for Penelope, who was the most thoughtful and sensitive of the three. Elias had promised to help her choose the music and practice a few simple steps. He knew he could manage both. He could take the job, work all night Friday, and show up Saturday afternoon, tired, but rich. No one would ever know. That evening, as Elias was about to accept the offer, he found Penelope sitting alone on the porch swing. She wasn't sad, just deeply focused, running her small hand over a slightly faded dress. "Daddy," she said quietly, looking up. "The girls at school said their dads have really important jobs, so they might be late. But you won't be late, right? You promised we'd practice." She wasn't asking about money or contracts. She was asking for certainty. She was asking for the one thing the former Elias Thorne could never deliver: consistency. Elias looked at her. $50 million. 6 weeks. A lifetime of quiet trust. He walked back inside, picked up his phone, and dialed Veronica. "Veronica." His voice was calm and steady. "I'm declining the offer. I have a prior commitment that is non-negotiable." "A prior commitment? To what? A yacht? A golf game?" she scoffed. "To a 7-year-old girl who needs me to practice the waltz," Elias said, without a trace of apology. "My legacy is here now. Good luck with the deal." He hung up, the silence after the call feeling richer than any corporate victory. 11. The new family pledge and the future. The next day, Elias spent 4 hours practicing simple dance steps with Penelope and her 2 sisters in the living room, their laughter echoing off the walls. He didn't feel foolish. He felt found. Audrey watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame, a soft, warm smile on her face. This was not the man who wrote the message, "I wanted a woman, not a mother." This was the man who had fought his way back, not with money, but with time. The father-daughter dance was a success. Elias, slightly awkward but beaming, was fully present, his attention solely on the girls. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Elias was helping the girls build a complex birdhouse in the yard. He saw Audrey watching him, a profound clarity in her eyes. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" she asked softly. Elias drove a nail into the wood with a deliberate, steady rhythm. "I am home, Audrey, permanently." He stood up, wiping sawdust from his hands. He reached into his pocket. It wasn't the large, ostentatious ring box he would have chosen 7 years ago. It was a simple, small velvet case. "The promise I made at the airport was a choice of fear over failure. The promise I made last month was a choice of presence over power," he said, taking her hand. "But this promise, this is a choice of forever." He knelt, not asking for forgiveness, but asking for a future. "Audrey Sinclair, you taught me that the only true wealth is the love you hold in your hands. Will you let me keep building this home with you? Will you marry me?" Audrey didn't hesitate. She didn't cry. She simply reached out, pulling him to his feet and kissing him. A kiss full of years of survival, pain, and ultimate redemption. They didn't have a grand wedding. They were married quietly on the porch overlooking the ocean, with Finley, Liam, and Asher serving as the proud, if slightly rowdy, ring-bearers. Elias Thorne's life became the ultimate proof that the true cost of an empire is the life you sacrifice to build it, and that the only legacy that truly matters is the constancy of love. The CEO had found his greatest purpose, not in a corner office, but in the center of his family's chaos. Final thought. True redemption is not a single act of apology, but a million small acts of consistent presence. When tested by the ghost of the past, Elias chose the unglamorous, but infinitely more rewarding life of a father. Thank you for reading the full journey of Elias and Audrey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your favorite moment of Elias's redemption in the comments. The CEO's Reckoning. 2 sons. 1. Inescapable truth. Attention. Fans of forbidden love. If you believe that money can't buy happiness or silence the past, you must hit subscribe and smash the like button now. The consequences of this billionaire's betrayal are about to unfold. Dorian St. Clair, a man whose face was synonymous with global success, was about to have his impeccably crafted world shattered by two small, identical boys. 5 years ago, under the brutal pressure of his aristocratic London family, the tech magnate had coldly abandoned his wife, Clara Vance, a woman who represented everything genuine and messy he craved. Now, on a crowded stage in Dublin, she reappeared. Not alone, but with two 5-year-old twins whose piercing sapphire blue eyes and the confident slant of their gold blonde hair were an undeniable miniature reflection of his own. The world saw him as untouchable, but facing Clara and his twin sons, Dorian was forced to confront a truth more devastating than any corporate loss. The price of his ambition was his paternity. Dorian St. Clair, the perfect product. Part 1. At 32, Dorian St. Clair was the CEO of St. Clair Industries, a multi-billion-pound empire built on green energy and revolutionary AI. His profile graced Forbes covers, he delivered keynote addresses at Davos, and he moved through the world with the polished sheen of inherited and earned wealth. His image was always the same: perfectly tailored Savile Row suits, golden blonde hair swept back, and sharp, icy blue eyes that signaled cold, disciplined ambition. He lived in a minimalist penthouse overlooking the Thames, drove a custom electric Aston Martin, and for all outward appearances, was destined for untouchable greatness. Yet 5 years earlier, Dorian had almost jeopardized it all for one thing his family deemed irrelevant: love. His secret was Clara Vance. She wasn't an heiress or a venture capitalist. She was a graduate student from Dublin, studying sustainable architecture on scholarships and part-time jobs, with paint often staining her trousers and notebooks full of chaotic, inspired sketches. She had long chestnut hair, expressive eyes, and a way of looking at Dorian that made him feel like he was more than just his title. With her, he laughed louder, slept better, and imagined a future that didn't revolve around quarterly earnings. He pictured a simple life, a small wedding, a cozy home, and children with those same expressive blue eyes. They met at a gala he attended only out of obligation. She was setting up stage lighting, and he literally stumbled over her while checking his stock updates. It was the most human moment he'd had in months. Their relationship blossomed in private. Takeaways on her tiny balcony, late-night talks about dreams, and long, anonymous walks through London's parks. She mocked his expensive watch and fiercely refused to let him pay her rent. But the St. Clair dynasty had other plans. When his parents, the formidable Lord Julian St. Clair, chairman of the board and Dorian's coldest confidant, and Lady Helena St. Clair, learned of Clara, their reaction was immediate and brutal. "She is not of your caliber. She dilutes your brand," Lord Julian stated plainly in his mahogany-paneled office. "Marry her, and we begin the process of removing you from succession." Lady Helena didn't hide her disdain. "Do you truly wish to shame the family? What will the stakeholders think when they see you with someone so ordinary?" Dorian tried to fight. He argued that he didn't care about perception. But St. Clair Industries was more than a company. It was a 3-generation legacy. His name was the brand. His face was the investment. As the pressure mounted, from his family, the board, the advisors, Dorian felt the walls close in. The worst part: he never told Clara the truth. One day, he simply ended it. No explanation, no argument. He said he needed to focus on his career and walked out of her small flat, leaving behind the woman he had pictured forever. Clara called once, then twice, then stopped. He never answered. He submerged himself in work, convincing himself it was necessary. But not a day passed without him thinking of her, missing her laugh, and feeling the deep, agonizing regret. Clara Vance, building cradles, not empires. Clara never believed in fairy tales, but falling in love with Dorian St. Clair felt perilously close to one. Then, one day, he was simply gone. A cold, carefully worded message about needing space to focus on his future. She waited, called, left a long, desperate voicemail, but the silence was definitive. She plunged into her architectural studies, trying to drown her heartbreak in blueprints and deadlines. But weeks later, she noticed the changes, the fatigue, the nausea, the delay. It was stress, she told herself. But when the test showed the word positive, her breath seized. The doctor confirmed her pregnancy, but the ultrasound revealed something she hadn't expected. 2 heartbeats. Twins. 2 vibrant lives growing inside her. 2 reminders of the man who had walked away without looking back. She considered calling him again, but remembered the silence. The cold response from his assistant. The realization hit her. He was not coming back. Clara decided to leave London. She found a job in a smaller firm in Dublin, a place where no one asked about her past. She rented a modest apartment and lived carefully. The twin pregnancy was brutal, but she was tougher. She worked through swollen feet, sleepless nights, and the crushing fear of being utterly alone. She gave birth to 2 healthy, beautiful boys, Caleb and Finn. They had the same startling gold blonde hair and the most intensely blue eyes she had ever seen. They were 2 small, perfect versions of the man she had loved. At first, it broke her heart to see him in their faces. But over time, that feeling softened into something fiercer. Love. Not for what could have been, but for what was. Her sons were everything. They were loud, messy, wild, and perfect. They were the reason she got out of bed when her body ached and her bank account hit 0. Clara never spoke Dorian's name. When the boys asked why they didn't have a daddy, she told them gently that sometimes people leave because they are afraid of love, and that it wasn't her or their fault. She focused all her energy on raising 2 curious and brave little boys who had no idea they carried a lineage that once governed a city. The inevitable collision. The forum. The invitation arrived unexpectedly. Architectural Futures Forum. Speaker selection. It was real. They wanted her to present her low-cost, sustainable women's shelter design on a major panel in Dublin. It was the recognition she had dreamed of. She hesitated for a moment. The cost of travel, the disruption. But then she said yes. She wouldn't let being a single mother stop her from professional advancement. She arrived in Dublin with Caleb and Finn in tow, 2 energetic 5-year-olds who chattered non-stop. She dressed them neatly in collared shirts and packed a bag full of crayons and snacks. She had no childcare. They would sit quietly near the back while she presented. The event was held in a sleek city skyscraper with glass walls overlooking the docks. She tried not to think about the possibility of running into anyone from her past. London was far away. He wouldn't be here. Why would he? Then she heard his voice. She was mid-sentence, answering a reporter's question, when the low, confident, and agonizingly familiar sound cut through the air. She froze. Her stomach twisted before her eyes confirmed it. Dorian St. Clair was less than 20 feet away, laughing softly with a group of sponsors in impeccable suits. He hadn't changed, only hardened at the edges. His relaxed expression was calm until his gaze landed on her. Clara watched the moment it hit him. First, confusion. Then, shock. Then, something deeper. His eyes flicked past her, towards the 2 small boys sitting quietly coloring on the carpet behind her table. Time slowed. Dorian's face went white. His gaze locked onto the twins, and Clara could see the gears turning in his mind, fast, desperate, undeniable. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. He walked towards her. She stiffened, clutching the edge of the display table. Everyone around them seemed to fade into background noise. The city, the forum, the years. Everything collapsed into this impossible moment. He stopped in front of her, his voice a barely audible rasp. "Clara." She didn't answer. He looked back at the boys, then back at her, visibly shaken. "Are they them?" She held his gaze. "Yes," she said, calm and level. "They're yours." He stumbled back, reeling. For a moment, he looked like a man who had just taken a punch to the gut. "I didn't know," he said. "I had no idea." "I know," she replied, her voice firm. "I tried, but you made sure I couldn't reach you." Dorian blinked, struggling to process. "But why didn't you try again?" Clara gave a soft, bitter, tired laugh. "I did. I left messages, sent letters. Your assistant told me never to call again. I assumed you had made your choice." Dorian lowered his gaze, the weight of comprehension settling heavily on his face. He looked back at the boys, who still didn't know who he was. Caleb looked up, smiled, and waved innocently. "I need to talk to you," Dorian said, his voice barely breaking. Clara crossed her arms. "Now you want to talk? After 5 years, at a public event?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I need to explain, and I need to understand." She stared at him, the pain she had buried deep surging to the surface, but she didn't let him see it. "Not here. Not yet. You don't just walk back in like nothing happened," she said. "But if you truly want to understand, start by learning their names." Dorian looked at her, and something fractured in his eyes. He turned to the boys, knelt down, and asked gently, "What are your names?" The twins looked at him, perplexed but curious. "I'm Caleb," one said. "I'm Finn," the other added. "What's your name?" Dorian smiled sadly. "I'm Dorian." They didn't recognize him. Why would they? Clara watched from behind the table, her heart pounding. This was not the moment she had prepared for. Yet here they were, not as strangers, not yet as a family. But something had started to change. The truth was finally out, and nothing would ever be the same. Interaction point. If you were Clara, what would be the single most difficult question you would ask Dorian about his choice to abandon you? Share your first reaction to Dorian's decision in the comments. The DNA test and the first steps. Part 2. Dorian didn't sleep that night. The image of the two boys, Caleb and Finn, persisted in his mind, haunting and vivid. Their names echoed like a mantra he never knew he needed. He could still see their eyes, so familiar it ached, and the way they had looked at him without recognition. They didn't know him. That realization shattered him. The next morning, he arranged a private DNA test. He told no one. It wasn't about legality. It was about getting permission to believe the truth, even though every part of him already knew. The results arrived 3 days later, 99.9% match. There was no denying it. He was their father. Dorian stared at the document for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, like a sacred heavy relic. A door he had unwittingly locked himself out of 5 years ago. He contacted Clara through the event coordinator. She agreed to meet him, once, at a small, anonymous cafe near the Dublin docks. No lawyers, no assistants, just them. She arrived with her usual quiet strength, simply dressed, her hair pulled back. She looked tired, but serene, and more beautiful than he remembered. Life had carved new lines onto her face, adding a gravity that hadn't been there before. They sat opposite each other, two people with years of pain between them, forever connected by two children who didn't know it. "I got the results," Dorian said finally. "They're mine." Clara nodded. "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find words that meant enough. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything you don't mean," she said, her eyes clear. I mean it now, Clara. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about them. I believe you, she said. But that doesn't erase what happened. Dorian looked down, shame washing over him. I wanted to fight for you. I was going to. But my parents, the board, it all came down on me. I didn't know how to be the man they expected, and the man you needed. You chose them, she said. Without malice, you walked away. Yes, and I had to raise them without you, she continued. While you were building empires, I was building cots. While you were giving speeches, I was trying to scrape together enough for dinner. Dorian winced. Her words were not cruel, just true, and they hit harder than he could have anticipated. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet, he said. I just want a chance to know them, to be a part of their lives, however small. They're 5 years old. They don't understand betrayal or loyalty, but they understand presence, Clara said slowly. You can't just drift in and out. You can't start and stop. If you want to be in their lives, it has to be until the end. I'm in, he said. Without hesitation, whatever the cost. She nodded, still cautious, but something in her posture softened. Then you start small. Pick them up from school one day. Come to the park. Sit with them. Let them approach you. If they ask questions, answer honestly. If they run away, don't chase them. Just be there. Dorian nodded, humbled. Okay, I can do that. Leaving the cafe, they parted without embraces or promises. Only a fragile understanding. Clara walked ahead, and Dorian followed at a respectful distance. Not as a couple. Not yet as a father. But as a man finally trying to correct what had once gone so terribly wrong. The cost of presence. Part 3. Dorian's first visit to the boys' school was nothing like the corporate events he was used to. He stood awkwardly by the school gate, dressed in a casual cashmere sweater and jeans, unsure where to put his hands. He'd signed off on billion-pound acquisitions without a sweat, but waiting to collect his sons who didn't even know they were his, made him feel like a nervous teenager. Clara had carefully set the stage. She told the boys that a friend would pick them up and take them to the park. No labels, just a chance to meet on neutral ground. When Caleb and Finn burst out of the school doors, Dorian recognized them instantly. Their blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight, and their identical blue eyes lit up when they saw him, though they didn't quite grasp who he was. He knelt down, unsure of the script. Hi, I'm Dorian. Your mom asked me to take you to the park today. Is that okay? The boys looked at each other, then back at him. Caleb tilted his head. Are you the man from the tall building with all the suits? Dorian smiled. Yes, yes, that was me. Finn squinted. Do you have snacks? Dorian laughed. Yes, loads. That was enough. They took his hands without hesitation, chattering about dinosaurs and spaceships. Dorian listened to everything, mostly just absorbing them. Their voices, their joy. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. At the park, they ran for the swings, and Dorian sat on a nearby bench, watching. For a few minutes, he allowed himself to pretend that this had always been his life. But that illusion cracked when Finn fell off the slide and bumped his elbow. Finn froze, eyes wide and glassy, trying to decide if the pain was worth the tears. Dorian ran instinctively, kneeling to gently check the small arm. You're okay, he said softly. No blood, just a little bump. Finn blinked. You sound like Mum. Dorian paused, then said quietly, I'm trying to be good at this. Finn leaned into him for just a second, and that small gesture nearly broke Dorian in two. He looked up and saw Caleb standing nearby, watching him intently. There was something calculating in Caleb's gaze, not suspicion, but a quiet assessment. Caleb finally walked closer. Are you coming back? Dorian looked him in the eye, his voice firm. Yes, I'm coming back. Caleb nodded once, satisfied. He then ran off, calling Finn to chase him. Dorian stayed there for a moment, catching his breath. That single question, "Are you coming back?" had felt heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. But his answer had been true. He would be back, again and again. The visits continued, quiet and consistent. Dorian showed up at school pickups, at the park, at classmate birthday parties he didn't know. He learned which juice boxes they hated, which superhero was currently in fashion, and how to separate them when they fought over a toy. He learned to kneel down and truly listen, to put his phone away, to simply be there. In time, the boys grew accustomed to him. They laughed more. They spoke his name with a little more familiarity. Caleb began to ask questions. "Did you know Mom when she was young? Do you live in a really big house? Why don't you have any kids?" Dorian answered honestly, carefully. One afternoon, as they walked back to Clara's flat, Finn took his hand without being asked. Caleb did the same, then looked up and asked, "Why do you always smile when you talk to us?" Dorian looked down at them both, their cheeks flushed from running, their matching backpacks bouncing. "Because I'm lucky," he said simply. "I get to be here with you." Clara waited at the door, arms crossed. She always watched him closely after every visit, as if measuring whether he had earned another. But this time, something shifted. She saw the boys rush inside, laughing, telling her about the swings. And then she looked at him. "You didn't leave today," she said softly. "You stayed even when Finn was scared. You stayed even when Caleb went quiet." Dorian nodded. "I told them I would." Clara looked down, then back up at him. "Keep doing that." Just like that, without grand gestures or emotional speeches, the wall between them lowered. It wasn't gone, but it had thinned. And Dorian knew this wasn't about being forgiven in one moment. It was about showing up in hundreds of them. And he would. Always. The name, Part 4. Dorian hadn't expected the word to come so soon. Nearly 3 months had passed since he started seeing Caleb and Finn regularly. He never missed a visit. He was never late. He had accepted that. For now, he was just Dorian, the man who brought good snacks, played tag without checking his phone, and laughed at their jokes. But one Saturday afternoon, something changed. Clara had an interview for a new design contract and asked Dorian to look after the boys for a few hours at his Dublin apartment, which he had quickly adapted with woven toy baskets, a small craft table, and a fridge full of juice boxes, and the kind of sugary cereal he definitely did not approve of, but bought because they loved it. They built an elaborate pillow fort between the sofas. Caleb declared himself captain. Finn insisted on being the science officer. Dorian played along as Commander Dad, a name Finn invented mid-game and said without thinking. Dorian froze for a second, startled by the word Dad. He didn't respond immediately, afraid that if he reacted too strongly, Finn would take it back. So he just smiled and kept playing. But inside, he was a whirlwind. The word kept echoing in his mind. He hadn't earned it yet. Or maybe he had, little by little. Not through grand gestures, but through consistency, time, and quiet love. Later that evening, after dinner, and lying under the still-standing pillow, Fort watching a cartoon, Finn snuggled up next to him and looked up. "Can I call you Dad now, or do I have to wait?" Dorian felt his throat tighten. He looked at Finn's small, serious face, then at Caleb, who was also watching, clutching his favorite plush dinosaur. Dorian reached out and hugged them both. "You can call me whatever feels right," he said, his voice husky. "But if you want to call me Dad, I would be very proud of that." Finn nodded. Caleb gave him a small smile, the kind that says more than words. That night, Clara came to collect them. She found them asleep on the sofa, Finn resting on Dorian's chest. Caleb nestled beside him, both snoring softly. Dorian had fallen asleep too, his arm protectively around both, the TV still on low volume in the background. She didn't wake them immediately. She stood there for a long moment, just watching. Something deep inside her, something that had been locked away, began to move. She saw how safely Dorian held them in their sleep. When she finally woke him, Dorian slowly stirred. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We must have all fallen asleep." Clara shook her head. They were happy. That's what matters. As she gently roused the boys, Dorian watched. "Finn called me Dad today," he said quietly. He asked if it was okay. Clara didn't speak immediately. Then she looked at him and said, "He wouldn't have asked if he didn't already feel it." The drive home was quiet. Dorian rode in the back seat with the children, holding their hands as they slept. Clara watched in the rearview mirror, and something inside her settled for the first time in a long time. The walls she had built to protect herself began to fall. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The final confrontation. Part 5. Dorian hadn't planned to confront his parents. He had avoided it for months, concentrating instead on showing up for Caleb and Finn, on earning Clara's cautious trust, on building something genuine from the pieces of the life he had once destroyed. But the silence stopped feeling like strength and started feeling like surrender. The more he embraced fatherhood, the more unbearable it became to know that his parents had stolen this from him. He needed to face them, not for closure, but for clarity. He arrived at the St. Clair estate in London on a crisp Sunday morning. Lord Julian received him in the library, sitting in the same leather chair where so many past conversations had been framed as sermons. Lady Helena appeared moments later, immaculate as always. "I'm surprised you came," his father said, crossing his hands. "We didn't think we would hear from you again." Dorian didn't sit. He stood near the fireplace, his posture quiet but unyielding. "We need to talk. About Clara. About the children." Lady Helena stiffened at the mention of her. "We warned you about her years ago." Dorian turned to her, his voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't warn me. You lied to me. You blocked letters. You ignored calls. You told people to keep her away from me." His father's eyes narrowed. "We did what was necessary to protect your future. You were emotional, unfocused. You would have thrown away your entire legacy for a girl who had nothing." Dorian took a deep breath, fury rising in his chest. "That girl is the mother of my children. Children you never even bothered to know existed. She raised them alone, with nothing. And they turned out better than anything this family has ever produced." Lady Helena stood up, her voice cutting. "Don't be dramatic. Do you think we haven't sacrificed for you? For this name? For your success?" "My success," Dorian interrupted. "It has nothing to do with this name anymore. The company, the image, the money. None of it matters if it costs me humanity. You tried to make me choose between love and legacy, and I listened. I walked away from the only real thing I had, but I will not make that mistake again." There was a heavy silence. His father leaned back, his tone suddenly colder, more strategic. "And now what? You'll play house with a woman and pretend you're a family man? Do you think the world will swallow that?" Dorian looked at him, disgusted. "I don't care what the world swallows. I care what Caleb and Finn see when they look at me. I care what kind of man I am when I tuck them into bed. And I care about the woman who carried that burden when I left. I am not here for your blessing," he finished. "I am here to tell you your control ends now. If you cannot accept my family, you will not be a part of our lives. That is your choice. But I am done living under your version of success." They didn't respond immediately. There was a visible fracture in the illusion of power they had always held over him. For the first time, Dorian wasn't the boy seeking approval. He was the man drawing the line. "I pity you," he added softly. "You will never know them. You will never hear Caleb explain how he thinks the moon controls feelings, or see the way Finn draws his dreams. You will miss everything, and one day you will realize you traded your grandchildren for control. He turned and walked out, leaving them in their perfect, empty house. When he returned to his apartment, Clara and the boys were waiting. She looked up when he entered, reading his face instantly. "Did you tell them?" she asked. He nodded. "Everything." "And?" "They didn't take it well." Clara stepped closer. "Do you regret it?" Dorian looked at his sons, who were building block towers on the floor, their laughter echoing through the room. "Not for a second," he said. The Silent Power, Epilogue. The following night, after the boys were asleep, Clara handed Dorian a small, plain box. Inside was a photograph, one she had taken weeks earlier when he wasn't looking. He was sitting on the grass at the park, Finn in his lap. Caleb nestled beside him, all three laughing uproariously. She had printed and framed it. A silent gesture. A thank you. A beginning. Dorian held the photo for a long time before placing it on the shelf next to the children's art projects. He no longer needed validation from anyone but them. His family. His future. The life he chose, finally, on his own terms. A year passed. Dorian's mornings began with spilled cereal and the joyous chaos of getting 2 5-year-olds out the door. His nights ended with bedtime stories and small hands curled against his shirt. His London apartment had been transformed from a sleek bachelor pad to a warm, lived-in home where finger paintings covered the walls. Clara had softened too. She still had moments when the weight of their history made her pull back, but those moments were fewer now. They had rebuilt trust through shared responsibility and mutual care. One Saturday morning, as the boys played and Clara made coffee, Dorian stopped by the window with a small box in his hand. Inside was a delicate but strong ring. He walked into the kitchen and waited for her to look up. "What's wrong?" she asked, noticing the seriousness on his face. "Nothing," he said. "That's the point." He took her hand and led her to the living room. He knelt down, and for a moment, everything faded into silence. "I don't want to rewrite the past," he said. "I just want to write the rest of the story with you, as your partner, as the father of our sons, as the man who finally understands what it means to love fully and show up completely." Clara smiled, a wide, genuine smile, and nodded. "Yes," she said simply, "because I don't need perfection. I just need you." The wedding came a few months later. It wasn't extravagant. They held it in the small community garden Clara had helped design years ago. Caleb and Finn, wearing matching waistcoats, carried the rings, too excited to walk slowly. As Clara walked toward him, her steps firm, her eyes locked on his, Dorian couldn't stop smiling. There were no grand speeches, just short, honest, unpolished vows. Promises to choose each other, not just on the good days, but on the difficult ones too. When they kissed, it wasn't the kind of kiss that marked a beginning. It was the kind that sealed something already built, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Standing barefoot in the garden with the love of his life beside him, and his sons chasing butterflies, Dorian finally understood what true success meant. He was home. Completely. Finally. And this time, he wasn't going anywhere. The beautiful conclusion. What does this slow, deliberate process of earning forgiveness tell you about true love? Share your final, heartfelt thoughts and any lingering questions for Dorian or Clara in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of redemption. Epilogue 2. The quiet threat and the unbreakable bond. Don't let the past sabotage the future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment. If Lord Julian tries to contact the twins, should Dorian and Clara let him? Share your advice. The unwavering rhythm. Life after the quiet wedding in the community garden didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. It settled into a rhythm far more valuable, a quiet, unwavering consistency. Dorian had fully embraced his new role. He moved his core operations from London to Dublin, delegating most corporate oversight to focus on innovation and, more importantly, school runs. St. Clair Industries continued to thrive, but its success was now a backdrop, not the main stage. Caleb and Finn, now 6, were inseparable forces of chaos and curiosity. They effortlessly switched between calling him Daddy when demanding a bedtime story and Dorian when trying to sound serious about a new Lego construction. Their bond with him was complete, built on thousands of small, present moments. Clara, now an equal partner in every sense, watched Dorian with a love that was mature, tested, and deeper than the initial burst of passion. She had reopened her small architectural firm, specializing in sustainable community projects, and her success was wholly her own. They were a team, no longer defined by the trauma of their past, but by the strength of their present choices. The echo of legacy 6 months after the wedding, an unexpected tremor reached their quiet life. It arrived in the form of a heavy, embossed envelope delivered to their Dublin address, bearing the official seal of the St. Clair family estate. Dorian opened it with a grim expression. Inside was a formal, chillingly impersonal letter from his father, Lord Julian St. Clair. Dorian, we acknowledge your decision to sever ties with the family and the firm's main board. However, it has been noted that the children, Caleb and Finn St. Clair, Lord Julian deliberately used his own surname, carry the St. Clair legacy. Regardless of your personal choices, the bloodline is paramount. We have established a substantial trust fund for their education and future. We expect to begin formal visitation arrangements immediately to ensure they are properly educated on their heritage. This is not a request, but an obligation to the name. Clara, reading the letter over his shoulder, felt the familiar cold knot of fear. Lord Julian wasn't trying to make peace. He was trying to reassert control through the one thing Dorian cared about: his sons. He is trying to buy their attention, Clara said, her voice low. Trying to introduce the legacy he forced you to choose over me. He's trying to remind me that I don't truly own my life, Dorian countered, crushing the letter in his fist. That my choices have consequences he can still manipulate. The unbreakable wall that evening, they sat the boys down. Not to discuss the letter, but to affirm their reality. Caleb, Finn, Dorian began, kneeling beside them as they ate their dinner. You two are the best part of my life, and your mom is the best part of both of yours. We chose to be a family, and we chose this life, this home, this city, this park down the road, because it makes us happy. Caleb, ever the rational one, looked up. Did the man from the very, very big house in London send you a boring letter, Daddy? Dorian smiled. Yes, he did. And he might try to contact you or your mom because he thinks he knows what's best. But only Mom and I know what's best for you. Do you understand? Finn, always the sensitive observer, leaned against Dorian's shoulder. We don't need a very, very big house. We have our pillow fort. Exactly, Clara said, her eyes shining with pride. We have the best fort in the world, and no one, no matter how big their house is, gets to decide who is in our fort. They decided together, as a unit. They would not accept the trust fund immediately, avoiding any legal entanglement that would give Lord Julian leverage. They would respond firmly through a lawyer, stating that any communication with the children must be approved and facilitated exclusively through their parents. The conflict wasn't over. It was a lingering threat, a quiet, persistent attempt from the past to infiltrate their future. But Dorian and Clara were no longer the people they once were. Dorian no longer feared his father's disapproval. He feared losing the beautiful, genuine life he had fought for. And Clara no longer feared being alone. She feared letting anything taint the happiness of her sons. The legacy they were building was not the St. Clair name, but the unshakable foundation of their family, built on presence, honesty, and a mutual promise. They would face every quiet threat, every temptation of the past, as one. What do you think is the next move for Lord Julian? Will he use legal means, or try a subtle emotional manipulation on the children? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter in their courageous journey. Epilogue 3. The Legal Storm and the Boys' Response. Will money and power break their bond? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to see the St. Clairs fight for their freedom. The unwanted offer. Lord Julian St. Clair, a man accustomed to having his demands met with immediate compliance, was furious at the firm, but polite refusal from Clara and Dorian's lawyer. His immediate response was not to back down, but to escalate. True to his nature, he instructed his legal team to bypass the parents and file a motion with the Dublin courts, seeking grandparent visitation rights and officially naming Caleb and Finn in the public record as St. Clair heirs. The motion was a calculated act of aggression, a way to force Dorian back into the fold and put his private life under the relentless scrutiny of the elite London press. The news hit Dorian and Clara not through a formal document, but through a sensational headline in a major London tabloid that had somehow been tipped off. Billionaire tech CEO Dorian St. Clair's secret twin sons revealed in high-stakes custody battle over St. Clair fortune. Clara was devastated by the invasion of privacy. He wants to destroy the quiet life we built. He wants to destroy me by using you and the boys, Dorian replied grimly. But we are prepared. We chose our lawyer carefully. We fight this together. The Children's Council. They decided to tell Caleb and Finn about the legal battle gently, using the language of their world. Boys, Dorian began one evening, sitting with them in their beloved pillow fort. Remember the man with the very big house who sent the boring letter? Well, he wants to spend time with you, but he wants to do it on his terms, not ours. He thinks that because he has a big house and a famous last name, he gets to decide what's best. Caleb, ever the captain, frowned. But he doesn't know the rules of our fort. Exactly, Clara affirmed. And the rules of our family are that we decide together. Your grandfather is trying to use courts and lawyers to force his way in. We need to tell the court what you want. Finn, clutching his plush dinosaur, looked at Dorian. But you are our daddy. Why does he think he is? The simple question was a powerful truth. Dorian pulled him close. He thinks his money and his name make him a father. But you two taught me that love and presence are what make a father. He is my father, but I am your dad. We will tell the court that. The decision of the fort. The family's defense was built entirely around the boys' best interests and the strong, stable home Clara and Dorian had created. Their lawyer emphasized the children's emotional maturity and the potential trauma of forced visits into a cold, unfamiliar environment. But the most compelling evidence came from the boys themselves. During a supervised interview with a child psychologist appointed by the court, Caleb and Finn were asked about their family. Who is your dad? The psychologist. Dorian! They chorused instantly. What is the most important thing your family does together? Caleb thought for a moment. We build the fort, and Dad lets us be captain. Finn added, we are safe in the fort, and nobody can come in unless we vote. When asked about the St. Clair estate, Caleb said, it's too quiet, and they don't have good snacks. The psychologist's final report was unequivocal. The children's primary attachment was to their parents, Dorian and Clara. St. Clair. The proposed visitation would likely cause significant distress and interrupt a stable, loving environment. A quiet victory. Lord Julian's motion for visitation was ultimately dismissed. The court ruled that the parents were acting in the children's best interest by protecting their privacy and emotional stability, and there was no evidence of alienation. The victory was quiet, achieved not with a boardroom coup or a headline, but with the simple, undeniable evidence of two little boys who knew exactly who their daddy was. After the ruling, Dorian and Clara hugged their lawyer. Outside, Dorian looked at Clara, then at the sky. "We won because of the fort." "We won because you showed up every single day, Dorian," Clara corrected, her hand finding his. "That is a legacy no fortune can ever buy." That night, they didn't celebrate with champagne or a fancy dinner. They celebrated in the living room, building the biggest, most elaborate fort yet, complete with a moat of blankets and a flag made from one of Dorian's old cashmere sweaters. As Dorian sat there, watching his sons laugh, he knew this was the only kind of empire he ever needed to build. What do you think Lord Julian will try next to reclaim his legacy? Will he finally accept defeat? Share your reactions to the boy's powerful testimony in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the final, heartwarming chapter of the St. Clair family saga.